Ethan Brooks shoved back from the table so hard his chair cracked against the diner floor because the words had already left his mouth and there was no taking them back. "She's my wife." 40 strangers turned. His 7-year-old daughter froze mid-bite, and the woman across from him, the CEO who signed his paycheck, who could end his career with one phone call, reached under the table and caught his wrist. She didn't let go. "Don't undo it," Claire whispered. What he didn't know was that somebody in that diner was already recording, and in 6 weeks that video would cost one of them everything. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and stay to the end. The clock on the microwave said 5:41 in the morning, and Ethan Brooks was already 3 minutes behind. He knew the exact shape of that 3 minutes. 3 minutes meant the lunch got packed sloppy. 3 minutes meant Emma's hair got brushed in the car instead of at the kitchen table, and she hated that because the car made the bristles pull. 3 minutes meant he'd hit the light at 4th and Weller when it was red instead of green, and that light took 90 seconds. And 90 seconds was the difference between walking into the office like a man who had his life together and walking in like a man who didn't. He'd been running on 3-minute margins for 3 years. He knocked twice on her door with 2 knuckles, the same 2 knocks, the same rhythm every morning. "Feet on the floor, kiddo." "I'm awake." "You're not awake. Awake people have their eyes open." "My eyes are open. Both of them." A pause. A long one. "One of them." Ethan almost smiled. He caught it before it got all the way to his face because if he smiled, she'd hear it in his voice and she'd milk it for another 4 minutes. "Cereal or eggs?" he said. "Eggs." "We don't have eggs." "Then why'd you ask?" "Because I like giving you the illusion of control." He was already opening the cabinet. "Cereal it is." He got the milk out. He got the bowl out. He did it in the order he always did it because the order was the only thing keeping the morning from coming apart. And he had learned the hard way over about 1,100 mornings that a man alone with a child survives on order. Emma appeared in the doorway in mismatched socks hair on one side of her head, standing straight up like it had an opinion. "Dad." "Yeah." "There's a thing at school." He didn't look up from the bowl. "What kind of thing?" "A parent thing." Now he looked up. She had her hands behind her back, which was what she did when she was about to ask for something she thought he'd say no to. She'd been doing it since she was 4. She had no idea he'd figured it out. "What kind of parent thing, Emma?" "It's a breakfast, for parents, on Thursday, at 7:30. She said it fast, all one word like ripping off a bandage. "And Mrs. Alvarez said we're supposed to bring one." "One what?" "One parent." Ethan set the milk down. There it was, the thing that lived in his chest, that had lived there since a Tuesday in October 3 years ago, and it came up the same way every time, not like grief exactly, more like a hand closing. 7:30, he said carefully. "Thursday." "You have work." "I have work at 8. "So you can't." "I didn't say that." "You always say that." She said it without any meanness in it at all, which was the part that got him. She wasn't accusing him, she was just reporting the weather. "It's okay. Marcy's mom comes. She said I can sit with them." "Emma." "It's really okay, Dad." And that right there, that was the thing nobody warned you about. Not the funeral, not the paperwork, not the first Christmas. Nobody warned you that 3 years in your kid would start being kind to you about your failures, that she'd start managing your feelings, that a 7-year-old would learn to say "it's really okay, Dad," in a voice that meant "I've already lowered my expectations, so please don't feel bad." He crouched down in front of her. His knees popped. He was 38, and his knees popped. "Hey." "What?" "Look at me." She looked at him. "I'll be there," he said. "You don't have to buy, Emma. I'll be there 7:30 Thursday. I'll bring the ugly tie." That got her. She fought it, and then she lost, and the grin came out sideways. The green one. The green one. "That tie is so bad. That tie is distinguished. Mrs. Alvarez is going to think you're a leprechaun." "Mrs. Alvarez," Ethan said, standing up, "is going to think I'm a man of taste and mystery. Eat your cereal." He got her to school at 7:52. He hit the light at 4th and Weller, and it was red, and it took 90 seconds, and he sat there with both hands on the wheel, doing the math on Thursday. 7:30 at the school, 8 o'clock stand-up at the office, 22 minutes across town in morning traffic. It wasn't possible. He'd do it anyway. He'd figure it out. That was the whole job now, figuring out the impossible thing quietly, so that nobody, especially not Emma, ever had to see the seams. At the drop-off line, she unbuckled and grabbed her backpack and then stopped half out the door. "Dad." "Yeah." "Do you ever get lonely?" The question came out of absolutely nowhere, the way her questions always did at the exact moment when he had no defenses up at all. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Marcy's mom said you must be lonely." Emma shrugged, one strap on, one strap off. "She said it to Marcy's dad in the parking lot. She didn't know I heard." Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "What did Marcy's dad say?" "He said that poor guy." Behind him, somebody tapped their horn. Ethan lifted a hand in the mirror without looking. "Emma." "Yeah, I've got you." "Okay, a man who's got you isn't a poor guy. A man who's got you is the richest guy in the parking lot." She thought about that. She had a very specific face she made when she was deciding whether he was telling her the truth or telling her the dad version of the truth. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. But you didn't answer." And then she was gone, backpack bouncing, running up the walk to where a teacher was holding the door. He sat there until somebody honked again. Harrington Architecture and Design took up 11 floors of a glass building downtown, and Ethan Brooks worked on the 4th in structural at a desk that faced a wall. He'd been there 6 years. He was good at it, better than good, though nobody upstairs seemed to know that. He was the guy they gave the problems to at 4:40 on a Friday. He was the guy who found the load path error in the Kessler Tower drawings 8 days before the pour, the one that would have cost the company $4 million and possibly a lot more than that. And when the memo went out congratulating the team, his name was 7th in a list of 9. He hadn't complained. He'd read the memo, closed it, and gone back to work. That was the reputation Ethan doesn't complain, which around that office had somehow over 6 years quietly turned into Ethan doesn't need anything. "Morning, Brooks." "Morning, Dale." Dale Whitaker leaned on the edge of his cubicle with a coffee he hadn't paid for. Dale was one of those men who had made a whole career out of standing near work while other people did it. "You hear about the meeting." "Which meeting?" "The meeting. 10 o'clock. Full board." Dale lowered his voice with obvious pleasure. "Vale's coming in." Ethan kept typing. "Okay. Okay, Marcus Vale is coming in and you're saying okay. I'm structural Dale. Unless Marcus Vale is a load-bearing wall, I've got about 4 hours of work between me and lunch." Dale laughed too loud. "Man, that's why I like you. Nothing gets to you." 2 desks over Priya Raman spun her chair around. "Nothing gets to him because he doesn't tell you anything. There's a difference. See, that's hostile. That's observational." Ethan let them go back and forth over his head like weather. He'd learned that trick too. If you stayed quiet long enough, people talked around you, and the talking around you was how you found out what was actually happening in a company. What was actually happening in this company he'd been hearing for 6 weeks was Marcus Vale. Vale Capital had bought into Harrington 18 months ago, back when the firm had overextended on the waterfront project and needed cash fast. Everybody said it was temporary. Everybody said the old man, Richard Harrington, who'd founded the place in 1979, with a drafting table and a second mortgage, had a plan. Then the old man's heart gave out on him in a boardroom in Denver, and he didn't die, but he didn't come back either. And his daughter took the chair. "You know what they're saying, right?" Dale was still going. "They're saying Vale wants the whole thing. They're saying he's got the votes." "Then he'd already have it," Priya said. "Not while she's sitting in that chair. That's the thing. She won't move." Dale shook his head, half admiring, half something uglier. "Ice water. That woman's got ice water." Ethan's hands paused on the keyboard for about half a second. Then he kept typing. The 10 o'clock ran long. Ethan knew it ran long because at 12:15 he went up to 11 to drop a signed set of revisions with the admin desk, and the double doors to the boardroom were still shut, and you could hear voices through them, and one of the voices was raised. It wasn't hers. Because sentiment is not a strategy. Claire, a man's voice, big and easy and used to filling rooms. "Nobody in this room doubts your intelligence. What they doubt is your position. You are 34 years old, you are running a firm your father built, and every client we bring in asks me the same question in the parking lot, every single one." A pause. "Ask it out loud, Marcus." Her voice, level, very quiet, which somehow made it carry more. "If you're going to say it in front of 11 people, say the whole thing. They ask who's really running it." Silence. Ethan should have walked away. The admin desk was empty for lunch. He could have left the folder and gone. He didn't. He stood in the hallway with a manila folder in his hand and his ID badge clipped to his belt, and he listened, and he didn't fully know why. And what do you tell them? Claire asked. I tell them you are, every time. I defend you in rooms you're not in. Vale's voice softened into something warm and reasonable, and there was something about that softening that made the back of Ethan's neck go tight. But Claire, I can only defend a story people believe. Right now the story is a grieving daughter holding a chair for her father. That's a beautiful story. It is not a bankable story. And your version? My version is a partnership. 2 firms, 2 names, stability. A chair creaked. And yes, a personal alignment. I've never hidden what I want. I'd marry you tomorrow and you'd wake up untouchable. Nobody questions a woman who's settled, Claire. That's not my rule. That's the world's rule. I'm just the only one honest enough to tell you. Ethan felt something turn over in his stomach. Then Claire Harrington's voice came back, and it hadn't moved a single degree. Item 4, she said. Waterfront cost recovery. Sanjay, you have the numbers. And that was it. She just stepped over it, like stepping over a puddle. Ethan set the folder on the admin desk and went back down to 4, and for the rest of the afternoon he could not concentrate worth a damn, and he told himself it was the Kessler revisions. At 7:20 that evening, the 4th floor was dark except for 2 banks of lights on a motion timer and the glow off Ethan's monitor. I wasn't there because he had to be. The Kessler work had gone out at 5. He was there because Emma was at Mrs. Whitfield's next door until 8. Mrs. Whitfield, who charged him nothing and refused every check he'd ever tried to write, and who said, the day I take money from you, Ethan Brooks, is the day I've lost my mind, and because 40 extra minutes of billable work was $40 extra and $40 was the school field trip in March. The elevator dinged behind him. I didn't turn around. Cleaning crew came through around then. Then a voice said, you're the one who caught the Kessler error. Ethan turned around. Claire Harrington was standing at the end of the row with her coat over her arm and her heels in her hand. He had seen her maybe 40 times in 6 years, always from a distance, always vertical and pressed and unmoving. He had never seen her holding her own shoes. He stood up so fast his knee hit the desk. Ma'am, sit down. She said it tiredly, not unkindly. Please, it's 7:20 and I've been standing since 6 this morning. If you stand, I have to stand. He sat down slowly. She came up the row and stopped a few feet away and leaned against the empty desk across from him. Ethan Brooks, she said. Structural, 6 years. You found a load path failure in a set of drawings that 4 other engineers had already signed off on, and you found it 8 days before the pour. 9 days, he said. Technically. 9 days. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Do you know your name was 7th on that memo? I didn't count. You counted. Ethan looked at his hands. 7th, he admitted. I wrote that memo, Claire said. Or rather, I approved it. Marketing wrote it. They ordered the names by seniority, because that's the template, and I signed it at 11 o'clock at night without reading past the first line, and it went to 400 people. She shifted the coat on her arm. So I'm here to tell you that I know it was you. It's a poor substitute for a memo, but I know. Ethan didn't have anything to say to that. Nobody in that building had said anything like it to him in 6 years. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me. It's the least anyone could do, and I'm doing it 4 months late. She looked past him at the dark window. Can I ask you something strange? Okay. Have you eaten? He blinked. I'm sorry. Dinner. Have you eaten dinner? She said it the way somebody says a thing they've already decided not to be embarrassed about. I'm asking if you'd have dinner with me. Ethan stared at her. Ma'am, Claire. Ms. Harrington, I'm not sure that's... You think I'm asking you out? I don't know what you're asking. Neither do I entirely. And for the first time, something cracked in the flat calm of her voice. Not much. A hairline. I had a meeting today that went 4 hours. In that meeting, a man explained to 11 people that I would be more valuable if I were married to him. Nobody objected. 2 of them nodded. She laughed once with nothing in it. And I sat there and I ran item 4. And then I sat in my office from 1 o'clock until now, and at some point I realized I couldn't think of one person I could call who wouldn't want something. She looked at him. Not one, Mr. Brooks. I have a Rolodex worth $200 million, and there is not one name in it that isn't a transaction. Ethan sat very still. So I walked the floors, Claire said. I'm not proud of it. I walked 11 floors looking for a light on. and the light on was yours, and you're the man who found the error and let somebody else take 7th place for it without making a sound, and I thought that's a person who doesn't want anything from me." She put her shoes down on the carpet and stepped into them and got half an inch taller, and the armor came back on with them. "It was a bad idea, I apologize, have a good night." She was 3 steps toward the elevator when Ethan said, "I've got my daughter." Claire stopped. "She's at the neighbors till 8, he said. "And I'm not going to be good dinner company, I'll be honest with you. I haven't had a conversation with an adult that wasn't about work or bake sales in about 3 years. But if you want to eat somewhere with a laminated menu and a 7-year-old at the table, I can do that." Claire turned around. "A laminated menu," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." "Where?" "There's a diner on Poplar. Marino's. The pie's better than it has any right to be." Claire Harrington stood in the middle of a dark office floor, and Ethan watched something happen on her face that he could not read at all. "Okay," she said. Emma Brooks was not shy. This was a thing Ethan had known since she was 2, and it was a thing he had made peace with, but it was also a thing he was reminded of about 90 seconds into the drive, when his daughter buckled into the back seat in a purple coat and a bike helmet she'd refused to take off for reasons she declined to explain, leaned forward and said, "Are you Dad's boss?" "Emma." "It's a question." Claire in the passenger seat turned around. "I am." "Like his boss's boss, Emma. Like everybody's boss," Claire said. Emma took that in. "Do you fire people, Emma?" "Sometimes," Claire said. "Did you ever fire my dad?" "Not yet." Ethan's hands went tight on the wheel, and then Emma laughed, a real one, delighted the laugh she saved for when an adult surprised her by playing along instead of talking down, and Ethan glanced sideways and saw that Claire Harrington was almost smiling. "Why do you have a helmet on in a car?" Claire asked. "Because Dad says the car is the most dangerous thing we do all day." "That is not what I said." "That is what you said." "I said cars are dangerous, and I said it once and you were 4. You said it Tuesday." Claire made a small sound that Ethan realized about a beat too late was a laugh she'd tried to swallow. Marino's on Poplar had 11 booths, a counter with 6 stools, a pie case that rotated with a squeak, and a waitress named Doreen, who had worked there since the Carter administration and did not under any circumstances hurry. They took the corner booth. Emma sat on the inside. Claire slid in across from them and looked at the laminated menu like an archaeologist looking at a pot. "There are 41 items on this menu," she said. 42, Emma said. "The pie is on the back." "Of course it is." Ethan watched her over the top of his own menu. It was strange. He'd expected he didn't know what he'd expected. That she'd be uncomfortable, that she'd check her phone every 4 minutes, that she'd order a salad and pick at it and leave at 8:15 with an excuse. Instead, she asked Emma what was good. And then she actually listened to the answer, which took a while because the answer involved a comprehensive review of every dessert Emma had ever eaten in that building and a digression about a cat that lived behind the dumpster. "His name is Buttons," Emma said. "Did you name him?" "No, he came with that name." "How do you know?" Emma looked at her like she was slow. "Because he answers to it." Claire nodded slowly, taking this extremely seriously. "That's good evidence." "That's what I said, but Dad said, Ethan interrupted, that a cat responding to food is not the same as a cat responding to a name." "Dad's a scientist," Emma explained to Claire with a certain amount of pity. "Dad's an engineer." "That's what I said." Doreen came and took their order and went away again, and there was a lull, and Ethan braced for the awkwardness of it. It didn't come. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said. She was turning her water glass slowly on the table. "You don't have to answer." "Go ahead." "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "This." She nodded slightly at Emma, who was building a small architectural structure out of creamer cups and had temporarily lost interest in the adults. "The lunches, the school, the job. You caught an error 4 senior engineers missed, and you did it in a week. When I looked, Mr. Brooks, I'm sorry I looked at your file in a week when you'd used 2 sick days for a child with strep throat." Ethan turned his coffee cup a quarter turn. "You just do it," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." He shrugged. "You wake up. There's a kid. The kid needs breakfast. You make the breakfast. Then there's a job, and the job needs a load path, so you find the load path. Then it's 9 at night, and you sit down and you go, made it, and then you do it again. And what about the part where you're allowed to be tired? That part's not in the schedule." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "When did she die?" she asked quietly. Emma's hands went still on the creamer cups. Ethan felt it. He always felt it the way his daughter's whole body listened whenever anyone got near the subject. 3 years ago in October, he said, and he made his voice absolutely normal. Her name was Sarah. She had a stroke. She was 33 years old, and she had a stroke on a Tuesday afternoon at a grocery store, and she was gone before I got there. Ethan, it's okay. He looked at Emma. It's okay, Em. Emma didn't say anything, but she scooted over about 2 inches until her shoulder was against his arm, and she stayed there. Claire's hand had stopped on her glass. I shouldn't have asked that in front of... You should, Ethan said. Everybody tiptoes around it. You know what that teaches a kid, that her mother's a bad word. He shook his head. Sarah's not a bad word. Sarah made terrible coffee, and she sang in the car, and she was the only person I've ever met who could make me laugh when I was furious. Right, Em. She sang really bad, Emma said to the table. She sang incredibly bad. She sang bad on purpose. That's the worst part, Ethan agreed. It was a choice. And Emma laughed wetly into his sleeve, and Ethan put his arm around her. And across the table, Claire Harrington sat with her hand over her mouth and her eyes shining, and she did not look anything at all like the woman who'd run item 4. Your turn, Ethan said. Claire lowered her hand. My turn for what? You asked me a hard one. That's how it works. That's not how anything works. It's how the booth works. Booth rules. She almost smiled. There are booth rules. There are extensive booth rules. Claire looked down at the table. My mother left when I was 9, she said. My father hired somebody, then he hired somebody else, then he stopped hiring people and started taking me to the office instead, and I did my homework in the conference room until I was 15, and I thought that meant he loved me. She turned the glass again. It didn't. It meant it was efficient. Claire, he's not a villain. That's the thing nobody understands. He's not cruel. He built something out of nothing, and he was proud of it, and he wanted me to be part of it. Her voice didn't shake, and somehow that was worse. But I was 17 before I understood that when he introduced me to people, he wasn't introducing his daughter. He was introducing the succession plan. Nobody said anything. Then a small voice said, That's really sad. Claire looked up. Emma was watching her over the top of a creamer cup tower. It is a little sad, Claire agreed. Do you have anybody from Emma? Ethan said. It's a question. You can't just ask people. It's all right. Claire folded her hands. No, she said to Emma. Not really. Not even a friend. I have people who are very nice to me. That's not the same. No, Claire said. It isn't. Emma considered this with tremendous gravity. Then she picked up a creamer cup and put it on Claire's side of the table. You can have that one, she said. Claire Harrington, who had that morning declined a merger that would have made her personally worth an additional $90 million, looked down at a plastic thimble of half and half like somebody had just handed her something out of a burning building. Thank you, she said. The food came. The food was by any objective standard mediocre, and all 3 of them ate every bite of it. At some point, Emma asked Claire whether being a boss meant you could eat pie for dinner, and Claire said it technically did, and Ethan said absolutely not, and was overruled 2-1, and Doreen brought 3 plates of apple pie at 8:40 on a Wednesday night. At some point, Claire took off her earrings and put them in her coat pocket and stopped sitting with her back so straight. At some point, Ethan Brooks laughed, actually laughed out loud, the kind that catches you, and afterward he sat there kind of stunned because he could not remember the last time that had happened in a room with another adult in it. And at 9:02, Doreen came back to the table with the coffee pot and stood there looking at the 3 of them for a second too long. Now don't tell me, she said. Ethan looked up. Ma'am, you 3. Doreen aimed the coffee pot at them like a pointer. I've been doing this 38 years. I know what a family looks like. She smiled at Claire. Look at the way that baby's leaning on him. Look at you, honey. You haven't looked at your phone once, and I'm going to tell you I have never once seen a woman dressed like you sit in that booth without checking a phone. Claire opened her mouth, and nothing came out. You 2 look like a family, Doreen said. Are you newlyweds? And this is the part Ethan Brooks would think about for the rest of his life. Because he was tired. Because he'd been up since 5:38. Because he'd spent 3 years being that poor guy in the parking lot, and 1 hour being a man in a booth with a plate of pie and a kid on his arm and a woman across from him laughing at something he'd said, and because for 60 consecutive minutes he had forgotten to be careful. because some part of him, some part he'd have denied under oath, wanted it to be true. He said, "She's my wife." The words came out flat and easy and completely natural, in exactly the voice a man uses to say a thing he's said 1,000 times. And then the diner went silent. Not really. Not literally. The fryer still hissed and somebody's fork still hit a plate at the counter. But in Ethan's head, everything stopped so hard he heard it. He watched Doreen's face light up. He watched Emma's head come off his arm slowly and turn to look up at him with an expression he had never seen on his daughter's face before and could not name. He watched Claire Harrington go absolutely completely still. "Oh God, His mouth had gone to sand. "I'm sorry, that's not ma'am, I misspoke, she's not." And under the table, Claire's hand closed around his wrist. Hard enough that he stopped mid-word, hard enough that he felt her pulse going in her fingers faster than his own. And that was the thing that shocked him more than anything else that night, that Claire Harrington's heart was slamming. He looked at her. She was leaning forward slightly. Her chin was down. Her eyes were on his, and they were bright, and they were terrified, and there was something underneath the terror that he would spend weeks trying to understand. And Claire Harrington whispered so quietly that Doreen 2 feet away didn't hear a word of it. "Don't undo it." Ethan's whole body went cold. "Claire, please." Her grip tightened. "One night. Give me 1 night of it. That's all I'm asking. Nobody in this building knows who I am. Nobody here wants anything." Her voice broke on the last word just barely, and she pulled it back so fast that a person who wasn't looking right at her would have missed it. "In 34 years, nobody has ever looked at me and seen that." "Seen what?" "Somebody's wife," Claire said. "Somebody chose." Doreen was still standing there, beaming coffee pot in hand. "Well," she said. "How long?" Ethan Brooks looked at his boss. "I was aware distantly, the way you're aware of a train you can hear but can't see yet, that this was the single stupidest thing he had ever considered doing, that there were 11 floors of people who could end him for it, that there was a man named Marcus Vale who had spent 4 hours that morning explaining to a room that Claire Harrington was alone and therefore weak, that his daughter was sitting 3 inches away with her whole heart in her face. He was aware of all of it. And then he thought about a woman walking 11 dark floors looking for a light that was on. 2 years, Ethan said. Claire's breath went out of her. 2 years? Doreen slapped the table. "I knew it. Ronnie." She turned toward the kitchen. "Ronnie, the corner booth celebrating pies on me, honey. Pies on me." And she went off toward the kitchen, and the 2 guys at the counter turned around and one of them said, "Congratulations, buddy," and lifted his coffee, and Ethan lifted a hand back, and his hand was not entirely steady. Under the table, Claire had not let go of his wrist. "You said 2 years," she said very low. "You didn't give me a number. I didn't think you'd do it." "Neither did I." Emma had not moved. Ethan looked down at her, and his stomach dropped through the floor of that diner because he had just lied in front of his daughter. In front of the one person on this earth he had promised out loud at a graveside 3 years ago that he would never, ever lie to. "Em," he said. "Emma, listen. Is it real?" "What?" Emma was looking at Claire, not at him, at Claire. "Is it real?" she said again. Claire Harrington looked back at a 7-year-old girl in a bike helmet, and Ethan watched a woman who negotiated 8-figure contracts for a living completely fail to come up with a single word. Emma waited. Then she said, "Okay," and put her head back on her father's arm and picked up her fork and started in on the free pie. And under the table in the corner booth of a diner on Poplar, Claire Harrington finally let go of Ethan Brooks's wrist, slowly, 1 finger at a time, like a person setting down something she wasn't sure she was allowed to hold. 4 booths away near the window, a young man in a Vail Capital quarter zip lowered his phone and stopped recording and looked at the screen for a long, long moment. Then he typed a message and hit send. The message, the young man in the quarter zip, sent at 9:06 on a Wednesday night, reached Marcus Vale's phone before Ethan Brooks had finished paying for pie he hadn't been allowed to pay for. Ethan didn't know that. What Ethan knew was that his hands were shaking on the steering wheel at 9:40, that Claire Harrington's car was still parked in the office garage 12 blocks behind them, that he had just told a room full of strangers he was married to the woman who signed his paycheck, and that his daughter had not said 1 word since the pie. You want to talk about it?" "No." "Okay." He took the turn onto their street. "You want to not talk about it in a way where you're mad at me or in a way where you're just tired?" Emma thought about that. He could see her in the mirror helmet still on chin down. "Dad, you lied." There it was. He pulled into the driveway and put the car in park and turned around in his seat so he could look at her properly, because that was the deal that had always been the deal. Hard things happen face to face. "Yeah," he said. "I did." "You said we don't." "I know what I said." "At Mom's." She stopped. She never could get all the way through that sentence. "You said." "I did." Ethan put his hand on her knee. "So I'm not going to stand here and tell you it wasn't a lie, because it was, and I'm not going to make it sound better than it is. But I'm going to tell you why, and then you can be mad at me for as long as you need to, and I won't say one word about it. Deal. Deal. Ms. Harrington doesn't have anybody." She said that. She did, and she meant it more than she let on. He chose his words like a man stepping on ice. "There's a guy at her work who's trying to take her company away from her, and one of the things he keeps saying in front of a lot of people is that she's alone, that she's got nobody, so she must be weak. And tonight for 1 hour she got to sit in a booth and not be that. And when the lady asked and I said the thing I said, she grabbed my arm, like a person going off a boat." Emma was quiet. "So I let it stand," Ethan said. "For an hour, that's all it was supposed to be." "But you said 2 years." "I did. That's a lot of hours." "That is a whole lot of hours," Ethan agreed. "Your dad panicked." And Emma, who had spent 3 years learning how to take care of a grown man without letting him know she was doing it, reached forward and patted the back of his hand twice. "It's okay," she said. "It's not okay, and I need you to stop saying that to me." "Why?" "Because you're 7, and you shouldn't have to be the one who says it's okay." His voice came out rougher than he meant it. "That's my job. That's supposed to be my job." Emma looked at him for a long second. "She was nice to me," she said. She didn't do the voice. "What voice?" "The one people do when they know about Mom." Emma unbuckled. "They go up here." She demonstrated in a syrupy little register that turned Ethan's stomach because it was so exactly right. "Hi, sweetheart, like I'm a puppy." "Yeah." She didn't do that. "No." "So." Emma opened her door. "I'm not mad." She got out and went up the walk, and at the top step she turned around. "Dad?" "Yeah, kiddo." "Is she going to eat with us again?" And Ethan Brooks stood in his own driveway with his keys in his hand and absolutely no idea what to say. His phone buzzed at 11:14 that night, a number he didn't have saved. "This is Claire. I got your cell from HR, which I want you to know I recognize as an abuse of my position. My office, 7:30, please." Then 90 seconds later, "I'm sorry." Then 4 minutes after that, "Thank you." Ethan sat on the edge of his bed and read all 3 about 11 times, and then he got about 2 hours of sleep. He was standing outside the 11th floor glass at 7:28 when he realized he'd worn the green tie, the ugly one. Emma had put it on the doorknob for him at 6 in the morning without a word, which was her way of saying, "Thursday is in 2 days, and I'm holding you to it," and he'd tied it in the car at a red light and forgotten what it was. Claire's assistant, a woman named Priscilla, who had worked for Richard Harrington for 19 years and for his daughter for 2, looked up from her desk. "Mr. Brooks." "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes went to the tie. They came back up. Nothing whatsoever happened on her face. "She's expecting you," Priscilla said. "Go on in." Claire was standing at the window with her back to the door and her arms folded, and she started talking before it closed. 41 people. Sorry. 41 people have said something to me in the last 2 hours. She turned around. She looked like a woman who'd slept about as much as he had, which is to say, she looked immaculate, and there was something wrong with her eyes. "The garage attendant congratulated me. The garage attendant, Ethan. His name is Bill. He's worked here 11 years, and last night was the first time he's ever said anything to me except, 'Good morning,' and this morning he said, 'Congratulations, Ms. H. We all wondered when you'd let somebody in.'" Ethan sat down without being asked, mostly because his legs weren't loving the alternative. "How?" he said. "Someone was in the diner." "I figured. There's a video, 9 seconds of it." Claire came around the desk and turned her monitor toward him. "It's on an internal channel. It's on 2 internal channels. By this afternoon it will be everywhere in this building, and by Friday it will be everywhere in this industry." The video was shot from 4 booths away over somebody's shoulder sideways. You couldn't hear the dialogue. You didn't need to. You could see Doreen with the coffee pot. You could see a little girl in a bike helmet leaning on a man's arm. You could see the man's mouth move for exactly as long as it takes to say 3 words. And you could see very clearly a woman in a $5,000 coat reach across a diner table and take hold of his wrist and not let go. "Oh," Ethan said. "Yes. You can't really argue with that picture." "No," Claire said. "You can't." She sat down on the edge of the desk, which he'd never seen anyone do in that office, and pressed 2 fingers against her eyebrow. "I need to say some things to you," she said, "and I need you to let me get through them before you talk, because I've rehearsed this 4 times, and I'll lose it if you interrupt." "Okay. 1. What I did last night was wrong. I am your employer. There is a power differential in this room the size of that window, and I used it not on purpose, but that's not a defense, that's just a worse version of the same thing. I put you in a position where saying no had a cost." She held up a hand before he could open his mouth. 2. I have already called an employment attorney. If you want to walk out of this building today, you will receive 18 months of salary, a letter of recommendation with my signature on it, and my personal guarantee that no one in this industry will ever hear 1 word about last night from me. That offer does not expire, and it is not contingent on anything. "Claire, I'm not finished." Her jaw was tight. 3. If you want to stay and you want us to correct it, I'll correct it. Today. I'll put out a statement that says, an employee made an offhand remark that I failed to correct it because I was tired, and that the responsibility is entirely mine. It will humiliate me. I'll survive it. She stopped. "That's it," she said. "Those are the options. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry." Ethan sat there and looked at her. "Can I talk now?" "Yes." "What's option 4? Claire's hand came down from her eyebrow. "There isn't an option 4. "There's always an option 4. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been an engineer for 15 years. Every single time somebody hands me 3 bad options, there's a 4th one they didn't write down because it makes them uncomfortable." Claire didn't say anything. "Say it," Ethan said. "No." "Claire." "Because it's monstrous," she said. "Because it's the thing a person like me does, and I've spent my whole life swearing I wouldn't turn into my father, and if I say it out loud, then I'm exactly what Marcus says I am, which is somebody who looks at a human being and sees a usable asset. Option 4 is we don't take it back." The office got very quiet. "Yes," Claire said. "For how long?" 90 days. "That's a specific number." "It's an extremely specific number." She stood up and went back around the desk, and now she was talking fast the way she must talk in board meetings, and Ethan understood suddenly that she had been up all night building this. "In 90 days, the waterfront recovery closes. If it closes clean, this firm is solvent without Vail Capital, and I can buy his position out at book value. He knows that. That's why the pressure right now is what it is. He has 1 quarter to take this company, and he is going to use every hour of it. And a husband stops him how? It doesn't stop him. It costs him his best weapon." Claire tapped 1 finger on the desk. "His entire argument to the board, the only one that's ever worked, is that I'm a 34-year-old woman holding a chair for a sick man, and there's nothing behind me. No partner, no stability, no second signature. He said it to 11 people yesterday, and 2 of them nodded. Ethan, I watched them nod." Her voice went flat. "You can't argue with that. I've tried for 2 years. You can't out-argue a feeling. But you can make it look ridiculous. And a woman who's been quietly married for 2 years to an engineer on the 4th floor, who kept it private specifically because she didn't want it to look like a merger, that woman isn't lonely. That woman is discreet." Ethan whistled low. "That's good," he said. "It's not good. It's a lie." "It's a good lie." "It's a lie I'd be asking a widowed father of a 7-year-old to tell 400 coworkers." Claire pressed her palms flat on the desk. "Which is why the answer is no. I'm answering for you. The answer is no. Take the 18 months, I'll do the correction this afternoon." 90 days, Ethan said. "Ethan, what happens to the 4th floor if he takes it?" Claire stopped. "That's not a fair question." "It's the only question." He stood up. "Because I've been here 6 years, Claire, and I've watched what happens when Vail Capital buys a firm. Kessler Brannigan, that outfit in Portland. You know what happens on the 4th floor? Structural gets consolidated. They keep 4 guys and they send the rest of the work to a contract shop in another time zone, and they call it efficiency." He shook his head. "There's 106 people in this building who make their mortgage here. Priya Raman's got a mother on dialysis. Bill in the garage is 11 years in with 2 years to his pension. That's not your responsibility. Neither's your company, but here you are at 7:30. Claire looked at him, and something went across her face that wasn't gratitude and wasn't relief. It was closer to fear. "You don't understand what you're volunteering for," she said. "Probably not. Marcus Vale is not a cartoon. He's charming. He remembers your kid's name and he means it when he says it. He is the single most likable man I have ever met, and he will take you apart with a smile on his face, and he will call it looking out for you." She swallowed. "And the second he decides this marriage is fake, he won't come at me. He'll come at you, because I'm expensive to break and you're not. Then we don't let it be fake. What does that mean?" "It means we do it right," Ethan said. "No half measures. I've built things, Claire. You know what kills a structure, not load. Load's fine. What kills a structure is a joint where two people each assumed the other one was carrying it." He held up a finger. "So, rules, written down, today." Claire pulled a legal pad toward her. Her hand wasn't quite steady. "Go," she said. 1. Emma is not a prop. She doesn't get put in front of a camera. She doesn't get coached. She doesn't get asked to say anything that isn't true. She knows exactly what this is because I already told her, and if she ever wants out, we're out that day. That's not negotiable, and I'll walk out of this room over it. Claire wrote it down. Agreed. 2. You and I tell each other the truth, every time. I don't care how bad it is. The second we start managing each other, we're done. Agreed. 3. He hesitated. When it ends, and it ends 90 days, that's the deal. Nobody goes back and rewrites what it was. I don't want you looking back at this and telling yourself you used me. And I'm not going to look back at it and tell myself I was noble. We're two people who got into a mess and handled it. Claire's pen stopped. That's not a rule, she said. That's a kindness. It's the most important one on the list. She wrote it down anyway, and Ethan noticed she wrote it slower than the others. 4, Claire said. Mine. She looked up. You're off my direct line. Effective this morning, you report to Sanjay, and every review you've ever had gets sealed and audited by an outside firm, so nobody can ever say a word about how you got where you are. And if you get a promotion in the next 5 years, it comes with a paper trail 3 inches thick. That's fine. It's not fine, it's necessary. Claire, I said it's fine. He almost smiled. You're going to find out I'm not real hard to negotiate with. That's exactly what worries me. There was a knock, and Priscilla opened the door about 4 inches. Miss Harrington, Mr. Vale is in the lobby. Claire went white. He doesn't have a meeting. He knows, Priscilla said. He said, and I'm quoting, tell her I'm here to congratulate her and I'll wait as long as it takes. A pause. He brought flowers. Claire closed her eyes for 1 full second. Send him up, she said. Then to Ethan, low and fast, 2 years. We met at the Kessler site walkthrough. We were married in April at the courthouse in Chelan County because your daughter had strep and we didn't want to fuss. We told no one because of exactly this. Can you hold that? I can hold that. Don't embellish. Ever. People who lie badly are the ones who add things. Claire. What? Breathe. She looked at him startled, and then Marcus Vale came through the door with an armful of white peonies and a grin like a summer morning. There she is. He set the flowers on the desk. He didn't try to hug her, which Ethan noticed, and filed. Claire, I have been up since 4 thinking about this, and I want to say the first thing before anybody says anything else. I'm happy for you. I'm genuinely, stupidly happy for you. Marcus. No, let me get it out. I've been rehearsing in the elevator like a teenager. He turned. And you. Ethan Brooks. Marcus Vale. The handshake was warm and dry and lasted a beat too long. Ethan Brooks, structural. You're the man who caught the load path on Kessler. Ethan blinked. I am. 9 days out. Everybody says 8. It was 9. Vale pointed at him, delighted. I read that report on a plane and I said to my partner, whoever this is, he saved somebody's life and doesn't know it. And now I find out he's been sitting at Claire Harrington's kitchen table for 2 years. He laughed and shook his head. You people, architects, secretive as a cult. Claire said, it wasn't a secret. It was private. It was magnificent, Vale said. Do you know what you did? You solved the problem I've been beating my head against for a year. Every institutional partner I bring in asks me the stability question. And now I get to say, gentlemen, she's been married for 2 years and never once used it, never traded on it, never put it in a press release. He spread his hands. That's not weakness, that's character. That's the best story this firm's had in a decade. Claire didn't move. You're taking this very well. Why wouldn't I? Because you asked me to marry you 19 hours ago. The room went absolutely still. Ethan watched Marcus Vale's face and understood in about 1 second everything Claire had tried to warn him about, because Vale didn't flinch, and he didn't get angry, and he didn't get cold. He got sad, warmly, generously sad, like a man taking a loss with grace, and if Ethan hadn't heard him through a door the day before, he'd have believed every inch of it. I did, Vale said quietly, and I meant it as a structure, Claire, not a romance, and I think we both knew that. And I'd rather look like a fool than have you think for 1 second I'm the kind of man who'd punish a woman for choosing better. He looked at Ethan. You got there first. Fine. I've lost bigger. Thank you, Claire said. Don't thank me yet. He picked a peony petal off the desk and rolled it between his fingers. Because now I've got a board problem, and it's yours too. 6 of those 11 people watched me make that argument yesterday. And this morning, 9 seconds of video shows up on the company Slack, and now they're all thinking the same thought, and if we don't get in front of it, it will eat the quarter. What thought? Ethan said. Vale turned to him with an expression of frank, friendly apology. That she made you up 2 hours after I put pressure on her, he said. Nobody spoke. I'm not saying I think it, Vale said. I'm saying they will, and I'd like to kill it Saturday. Saturday, Claire repeated. Fielding Foundation Gala. It's on your calendar. You were going to skip it. Don't skip it. He tapped the desk twice. Come with your husband. Let 200 people take pictures. Let the 6 who nodded at me yesterday shake his hand. It ends there. He smiled at Ethan. You own a tux, Mr. Brooks. I own a green tie. Vale laughed big and real. God, I like you. Rent one. Or don't, honestly don't. Show up in a suit that fits and let them see a guy who doesn't care. He was already moving toward the door. Claire, one more thing and then I'll get out of your hair. Yes, your father's back Monday. Claire's whole body changed. Ethan saw it happen, a stiffening that started at the shoulders and went all the way down. He's not cleared to travel. He cleared himself. You know how he is. Vale's voice went gentle. He's coming to the board meeting on the 18th. And Claire, he's going to hear about this in an airport lounge from somebody who isn't you. He knocked once on the doorframe kindly. Call your dad. And he left. For about 10 seconds, neither of them said anything. Then Claire said, he was in the diner. What? Somebody in that diner works for him. The video went to him first, and he had it before 11, and he spent all night deciding how to play it. She was staring at the flowers, and what he decided was to hug it. Why? Because a man who fights the marriage looks jealous, Claire said, and a man who celebrates the marriage gets to be the one who calls the press conference. He didn't come here to congratulate me. He came here to put us on a stage in 4 days with 200 witnesses, where every single thing we do gets photographed and compared. She finally looked up. He's not attacking the lie, he's inflating it, until it pops. Ethan let out a breath. Okay, he said. Okay. Yeah, okay. He picked up the legal pad and looked at their 4 rules. Then we better get good at this by Saturday. Which is how Ethan Brooks ended up spending Thursday morning in a school cafeteria with 200 parents, a paper cup of orange juice, and Claire Harrington sitting beside him on a bench built for 8-year-olds. He had not asked her to come. That was the part he kept coming back to later. He'd mentioned it once in the car on Wednesday, in the context of, I have to be at a thing at 7:30 Thursday, so I'll be late, and Claire had said, what thing? And he'd said, parent breakfast, it's nothing. And she'd said nothing at all. And at 7:26 on Thursday morning, she was standing in the parking lot of Lincoln Elementary in Flats. You own Flats, Ethan said. I own many things. Claire, don't. She was holding a grocery store bouquet like a woman holding a live animal. I moved a call with Tokyo. Don't make it a moment. I wasn't going to make it a... You were absolutely going to make it a moment. Then Emma came around the corner of the building at a dead sprint, backpack slamming, and stopped about 4 feet away. You came, she said. I did. Are those for Mrs. Alvarez? They're for you. Emma looked at the flowers. Then she looked at her father with an expression of such total, undisguised triumph that Ethan had to turn around and study the parking lot for a second. Inside, they sat on a bench at a folding table, and Emma introduced Claire to 4 separate children as my dad's boss, who is also my, and then stopped every single time and looked at Ethan and changed it to who is also here. She didn't lie, not once. Ethan counted. Mrs. Alvarez came around with a clipboard at 7:50. Mr. Brooks, good, I've been meaning to catch you. She flipped a page. We're updating emergency contacts. Right now we have you and we have Ruth Whitfield and that's it. District wants 3. Right, yeah. Ethan reached for his pocket. Let me think, my brother's in Ohio, so Ohio's no good, they want somebody within 30 minutes. Then it's, I don't know. Give me a couple days. And Emma said, Claire's within 30 minutes. The table went quiet. Emma, Ethan said. She works 12 minutes away. I looked it up on the map at the library. Emma turned to Claire, matter of fact. 12 minutes if there's no train. Mrs. Alvarez's pen hovered. Is that I'm sorry, are you a relative? Ethan opened his mouth, and Claire Harrington said, I'm not. Ethan's stomach dropped. I'm not related to Emma, Claire said evenly to a teacher with a clipboard in a cafeteria full of parents. And I want to be very careful about what I put my name to on a form, so I'll tell you exactly what I am, and then you decide whether it qualifies. She set down her juice. I'm someone who can be in this parking lot in 12 minutes, any day, any hour. If this child is sick and nobody's answering, I will leave whatever room I'm in, and I will come and get her, and I'll do that, whether or not there's a piece of paper, and I'll keep doing it after any arrangement between me and her father ends. Nobody at that table breathed. That's what I am, Claire said. Put down whatever word fits. Mrs. Alvarez looked at her for a moment. Then she wrote something on the form and said, I'll put you under family friend, if that's all right. That's more than all right, Claire said. Under the table, out of sight of every person in the room, Emma Brooks put her hand on Claire's arm and left it there. And Ethan sat with a paper cup of orange juice and a green tie, and a feeling in his chest he had absolutely no business having, because it was Thursday, and he was on day 2 of 90, and the woman beside him was a business arrangement with a legal pad. That was Thursday. Friday was when it started to go wrong. Priya Raman cornered him at the printer at 4:40 with her arms crossed. 2 years, she said. Priya. 2 years, Ethan. I sat next to you when you were eating gas station sandwiches for lunch because Emma's dentist bill came in. I loaned you $40 in March. I paid you back. You paid me back in cash over 3 weeks in tens like a man in a movie about gambling. Her jaw was set. And I'm supposed to believe you were married to a woman worth $200 million. Ethan's mouth was dry. Rule 2, tell the truth. But Rule 2 was with Claire, and this wasn't Claire, and there were 106 mortgages in that building. Priya, don't lie to me. I'm not going to lie to you, Ethan said. I'm going to tell you that I can't answer that question, and that's the most honest thing I've got, and I'd rather you be angry at me than lied to. Priya's face did something complicated. Okay, she said finally. Okay. Yeah, she picked up her printouts, because that's the first thing anybody said to me all week that wasn't a script. At the corner, she stopped. Ethan, that woman in accounting, Dana, somebody called her last night, asked about you. Ethan went still. Who? Said he was doing a background check for a mortgage refinance, Priya said. She's not stupid. You didn't apply for a refinance. Ethan called Claire at 5:20 from his car. He's already started. I know, she said. It's worse than that. Priscilla got a call this morning from a records clerk in Chelan County. Somebody requested a certified copy of our marriage license. Ethan closed his eyes. There isn't one. There isn't one. So he'll know by Monday. He'll know by tomorrow, Claire said, which is why he scheduled the gala for tomorrow. Ethan sat in a parking garage with the phone against his ear. Claire, ask me the thing you're not asking me. I'm not going to ask you that. You've been not asking me for about 90 seconds. I can hear it. Silence on the line. There's a courthouse in Vancouver, Washington, Claire said very quietly. It's 90 minutes. There's no waiting period. They're open until 4. And a license from tomorrow doesn't say 2 years. No, it says tomorrow. Her voice was almost nothing. But it says married, and once a thing is legally true, all a person can prove is that we lied about a date. And people forgive a date, Ethan. Nobody forgives a fiction. Ethan stared at the concrete wall in front of his car. You understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking, which is why I'm not asking it. Something in her cracked. I'm telling you the courthouse hours, and I'm going to hang up, and if you don't call me back tonight, I will never mention it again as long as I live. And Monday, I'll stand up in that boardroom and tell the truth and take the whole thing on myself. That's not a threat. That's the actual plan. I have the statement written. Claire, I've used you enough for 1 week, Claire Harrington said, and hung up. Ethan drove home. He made spaghetti. He supervised a spelling test on the words cousin breathe, listen, and he got listen wrong on purpose, so Emma could correct him, which she did with enormous satisfaction. At 8:40, he sat on the edge of her bed. I need to ask you something and I need you to think about it like it's real because it is. Emma sat up. You know how you asked if it was real, Ethan said, at the diner. Yeah. It's not. Not the way people mean. He rubbed the back of his neck. But it might have to be on paper. There's a form and a judge and it makes it so nobody can call your dad a liar. And I would still be exactly the same and it would still be me and you in this house and nothing changes at all except the form. Emma pulled the blanket up. Does she come here? Sometimes. Probably. For appearances. Does she eat with us? Emma. That's my question, Emma said. That's the one I want to know. Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment. Yeah, he said. She'd eat with us. Emma lay back down and turned over and pulled the covers up to her chin. Then okay, she said. Baby, I need you to understand it ends. 90 days. She's got a company and we've got... Dad. Yeah. You said don't say it's okay when it's not. Her voice was very small in the dark. So I'm saying it when it is. Ethan sat there until she was asleep, which took 11 minutes, and then he went into the kitchen and stood with both hands on the counter for a long time. At 10:52 p.m. he called. She picked up on half a ring. Vancouver, Ethan said. What time do we leave? There was a sound on the other end of the line, a hard, sharp intake of breath, and then nothing for so long that he checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. Claire, I'm here. Her voice was wrecked. I'm here. I need a second. Take it. Nobody's ever said yes to me, she said. Do you understand that? Not once. People agree with me. People comply with me. There's not one person alive who ever wanted to and said yes. Well, Ethan looked out the kitchen window at nothing. Now there's one. They left at 7:15 the next morning and were standing in front of a county clerk named Bernadette by 9:40, and Bernadette asked if they'd like the ceremony room or the counter, and Claire said counter, and Ethan said ceremony room at exactly the same time. Claire turned. Why? Because when she's 19 and she asks me about this, Ethan said, I'm not telling my daughter it happened at a counter. They did it in the ceremony room. It took 4 minutes. There were 2 witnesses, a court security officer named Ray, and a woman waiting on a fishing license, and Claire's hands were shaking so badly that Ethan had to steady them to get the ring on a plain steel band from a case by the door, $31, because neither of them had thought that far. And when Ray said, well, go on then, Ethan looked at Claire, and Claire looked at Ethan, and neither one of them moved. We don't have to, Ethan said quietly. I know. It's a form. I know. And then Claire Harrington reached up and put her hand on the side of his face, the way you'd touch something you were checking was actually there, and kissed him. And it lasted about 1.5 seconds, and neither of them said one word about it for the entire 90-minute drive home. They arrived at the Fielding Foundation Gala at 7:40 that night, and Marcus Vail was waiting at the top of the steps with 200 people behind him and a phone in his hand. Claire, he came down 3 steps, arms wide, beaming. And the man himself, Ethan, you clean up. Marcus. Listen before we go in. Vail's smile never moved. He turned the phone around. I got something an hour ago, and I want to handle it privately because I don't do ambushes, and I'd rather look you both in the eye. On the screen was a record search from Chelan County, Washington. No matching record found. Claire didn't blink. Marcus. So I widened it, Vail said pleasantly. All 39 counties in the state, 2 years back. He swiped. No matching record found. And then, he said, about 40 minutes ago, my guy tried Clark County, because it occurred to me that people who are in a hurry go to Vancouver. He swiped one more time. Brooks Ethan M., Harrington Claire. Issued and recorded 9:52 a.m. today. Marcus Vail looked up at the two of them, and his voice when it came was as warm and kind as it had been in the office on Wednesday. 200 people in there, he said, and every one of them thinks she's been married 2 years. So here's what's going to happen. You're both going to walk in, and you're going to have a wonderful night, and I'm not going to say a word to anyone. What do you want? Claire said. The 18th, Vail said. Board meeting. You second my motion on the merger, and this stays between us forever, and I'll dance at your 10-year anniversary. He put the phone in his pocket and straightened Ethan's lapel with 2 fingers. Or don't. And I'll put that document on a screen in front of your father, your board, and every client you've got, and I won't even have to say the word fraud. They'll say it for me." He turned and started up the steps. Then he stopped and looked back, and for the first time all week, there was nothing warm in his face at all. "Ethan," he said, "that daughter of yours, Emma Wright, 2nd grade at Lincoln." He smiled. "Beautiful kid. I really hope nobody ever has to explain to her what her father signed today." Ethan Brooks watched Marcus Vale climb the last 4 steps and disappear through the doors, and then he stood there in a rented tuxedo with his wife's hand on his arm and discovered something about himself he had not known in 38 years. He wanted to hurt a man, not argue with him, not beat him in a meeting. He wanted to put Marcus Vale on the ground. "Ethan, I'm fine. Your arm is shaking." "I said I'm fine." "You are not fine, and if you walk in there like that, everything we did this morning was for nothing." Claire's fingers tightened. She hadn't moved her eyes off the doorway. "Look at me." He didn't. "Ethan." He looked at her. "He said her name to make you do exactly this," Claire said. "He said it on the steps outside where there are no cameras, because he needed you angry before you walked into a room with 200 people and 6 board members in it. If you go in there with that face by Monday, the story is that Claire Harrington's husband is unstable." She was breathing carefully the way people breathe when they've decided not to fall apart. "Please, give me 2 hours of the man from the diner." Ethan closed his eyes. Then he let out a long breath and rolled his shoulders once the way he did before a sight walk, and when he opened his eyes, he had put it somewhere. 2 hours, he said. "Thank you. And then you and I are going to have a conversation about what we do to him." "Ethan." 2 hours, Claire. They went in. Later, Ethan would remember almost nothing about that room, except how many hands he shook. There was an orchestra. There was a man from a bank in Chicago who talked for 11 minutes about a boat. There was a woman on the fielding board who held Claire's hand in both of hers and said, "Oh, honey, we all wondered." And Claire smiled and said thank you, and did not once let go of Ethan's arm. And there were the 6. I knew them by sight by the end of the first hour, because Claire steered him past every one of them like a woman walking a client through a building. "Gerald Pike," he nodded. Which one was he? Gray tall, the one who said fascinating 4 times. Her lips barely moved. "He's been on this board since I was in middle school. He held me at my mother's going-away party." And he nodded. He nodded. Gerald Pike shook Ethan's hand and asked what he did, and when Ethan said structural engineering, the old man's whole face changed. "You're the Kessler fellow." "Yes, sir." "Hell of a catch, that." Pike's eyebrows came together. "You know what a pour like that costs to break out? $4 million to fix it and about $40 to settle it if the thing had ever gone sideways with people inside." He looked at Claire and then back at Ethan, and something reorganized behind his eyes. "And you've been married to her the whole time, never said a word." "There wasn't anything to say." "There is always something to say when you're married to the boss son. That's the point. Most men can't help themselves." Pike snorted. "You know how many people have tried to use that woman as a ladder? I've watched it for a decade." "Yes, sir. I've seen a little of it this week." Pike's eyes came up sharp. Claire's hand tightened on his arm. "Don't." And Ethan smiled easily and said, "It's a big company. There's always somebody." Pike held the look 1 second longer than was comfortable. "There is," he said. "There surely is." And then Marcus Vale was there with a glass in each hand and a laugh already going, and he put one glass in Ethan's hand like they'd known each other 20 years. "Gerald, has he told you about the load path?" "He has not. You have 6 times." "I'll tell you again on the 18th. Vale clapped Ethan on the shoulder, friendly, warm, and just hard enough that Ethan felt it. "This one's a keeper, Gerald. Claire's got herself a serious man." "Marcus," Claire said. "Claire." He raised his glass to her. "Beautiful night. Really, I mean that." At 11 o'clock, Ethan found her in a coat room off the north hallway, with her back against the wall and both hands over her face. He shut the door. "Don't," she said without moving her hands. "Don't be kind to me right now. I can't take it." "Okay. Say something awful. You've got a run in your stocking." Claire made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost not, and slid down the wall about 6 inches and stopped. "He's going to do it," she said. "Whatever we say on the 18th, he's going to do it, because he doesn't want my second on the motion. He wants me finished. If I second the merger, I'm a woman who traded her board vote to cover up a fraud, and he owns me for the rest of my life. And if I don't, he burns me in a room with my father in it." She lowered her hands. Her eyes were red. There's no version where I walk out of the 18th with this company. Probably not. That's not what you're supposed to say. You told me Rule 2. He crouched down in front of her, one hand on the wall. So here's Rule 2. He's right about everything he's got, and he's going to use it, and it's going to hurt. That's the truth. Wonderful. I'm not done. Ethan's voice dropped. Claire, why did Vale Capital get into this firm? She blinked. The waterfront. We overextended. We needed cash in 90 days. Why did you overextend? Because our cost basis moved $11 million in a quarter. Right. Ethan nodded slowly. $11 million in 1 quarter, on a project where the steel was already contracted. Claire went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been in structural for 15 years, and I have never once seen a fixed steel contract move $11 million in 90 days without somebody rescoping it. He rubbed his jaw. And I sat in that 10 o'clock hallway on Wednesday and heard a man say he defends you in rooms you're not in. And I've been thinking about it for 4 days, and what I keep coming back to is how did he know what? He knew it was 9 days on Kessler, not 8, 9. Ethan looked at her. Everybody in this industry says 8 because the memo said 8. He said 9. That means he didn't read the memo. He read the file, the internal one. He let that sit. Claire, when did Marcus Vale start reading your internal engineering files? Claire Harrington sat on the floor of a coat room in a $4,000 dress and stared at him. Before the loan, she whispered. That'd be my guess. Ethan, if he was inside our numbers before the loan. Then he didn't rescue this company from a hole, Ethan said. He dug it. Neither of them said anything for a moment. I can't prove that, Claire said. No, not by the 18th, not alone, and not from the 4th floor with a login that Sanjay controls. Ethan stood and put a hand down for her. But I know somebody who's been staring at those cost sheets for 2 years and complains about them every single Friday. Claire took his hand and let him pull her up. Priya Raman, she said. Priya Raman. Priya listened to the whole thing on Sunday afternoon at Ethan's kitchen table with her arms crossed and her coffee going cold, while Emma watched cartoons in the next room with the volume up. When he finished, she said, So it's fake. Priya. Is it fake, Ethan? It's legally real as of Saturday at 9:52 in the morning, he said, and everything before that was a mistake I made at a diner because I was tired. That's the whole truth, and it's the only one I've got. Priya looked at him for a long moment. You paid me back in tens, she said. I did. Over 3 weeks. I did. You have never in 6 years told me one lie about money, which is the only thing anybody ever lies about. She uncrossed her arms and pulled her laptop out of her bag. The $11 million is garbage, by the way. I've said so 9 times. The line item is Engineering Rescope Waterfront Q2, and there are $11 million in it, and 31 hours of engineering behind it. 31 hours, Ethan. I could do 31 hours in a week. Ethan sat down slowly. Who signed it? That's the thing. Priya turned the screen. Nobody. It came in as an outside consult invoiced through a firm called Hallbrook Design Group, approved at the executive level because it cleared the threshold and the paper trail dead ends at the approval. Who's Hallbrook? 2 guys in a P.O. box in Bellevue, Priya said. I looked them up in March. They have no website. I flagged it. I got told it was above my grade. Told by who? Priya's jaw tightened. Sanjay, she said. That was Sunday. On Monday morning, Richard Harrington came back to his building. Ethan wasn't there for it. Ethan was on the 4th floor with his head down and 41 unanswered emails, and the way he found out was that at 10:15, the entire floor went quiet at once, the way a room goes quiet when a teacher walks in. The old man came down the row with a cane in his right hand, and Priscilla 3 steps behind him, and he stopped at Ethan's desk. I was smaller than the portrait in the lobby. That was the first thing. 76 years old, one side of his face slightly slower than the other, and eyes that had not slowed down at all. Stand up, Richard Harrington said. Ethan stood up. You're the one. Ethan Brooks, sir. I know your name. I've had it read to me 4 times since Friday. He looked Ethan up and down without any hurry at all. My daughter tells me you were married in April in Chelan County. Sir, don't. The cane came up 2 inches and went back down. I've been lied to by professionals my entire life, son, and you are not one, and I would rather not watch you try. Priscilla. Yes, Mr. Harrington. Get his coat. He's coming to lunch. They went to a steakhouse where the old man had eaten every Monday for 26 years, and the waiter brought him iced tea without being asked, and Richard Harrington put both hands on his cane and said, "How much is she paying you?" "Nothing." "How much is she going to pay you?" "Nothing." "Everybody gets paid, Mr. Brooks." "Then I'm getting cheated," Ethan said, "because I've got a mortgage, a 7-year-old, and 18 months of severance on the table that I turned down on Thursday, and I'd appreciate it if you'd ask me a harder question." The old man's eyes came up. For about 4 seconds, nobody said anything. Then Richard Harrington laughed one dry bark of it, which turned into a cough, which he waved off. "All right," he said. "Here's a harder one. Why'd you say it?" "Say what?" "In the diner. In front of my granddaughters." He stopped and corrected himself irritably. "In front of your daughter. Why'd you say it?" Ethan turned his water glass a quarter turn. "Because it was the first hour in 3 years I forgot to be careful," he said. The old man went still. "And your daughter's mother?" "Sarah, 3 years in October, stroke at a grocery store on a Tuesday." Richard Harrington looked out the window for a moment. "My wife left me in April of 1998, and I told people she died for about 4 years because it was easier. Then I stopped because Claire got old enough to read." He turned back. "You know what she said to me, 9 years old? She said, 'Dad, is Mom dead, or did she just not want us?' And I said the second one, and she nodded, and she never asked me a personal question again. Not one. 34 years old, and she has never asked me a personal question again." Ethan didn't say anything. "You think I don't know what I did to her?" the old man said. "I know. I'm not stupid, I'm just late." He tapped the cane once on the floor. "Now, Marcus Vale." "Sir." "He called me in an airport in Denver on Friday to be sure I'd heard about the wedding from him first, which is a thing a man does when he wants you to know he owns the information." Richard Harrington's mouth thinned. "So let's stop dancing. What's he got?" Ethan looked at the old man across the table. "Rule 2. A marriage license dated Saturday," he said, "and a story about 2 years." Richard Harrington closed his eyes. "Oh, Claire," he said quietly. "Sir, it was my mistake. She tried 3 separate times to— I know whose mistake it was. I've met my daughter." He opened his eyes. "And what have you got?" $11 million, Ethan said, in an engineering rescope on the waterfront project invoiced by a Shell in Bellevue with a P.O. box and no website approved above the threshold, backed by 31 hours of work. In the quarter right before Vale Capital lent you the money to survive the shortfall it created. The steakhouse got very quiet, or maybe it just seemed that way. "Say that again," Richard Harrington said. Ethan said it again. The old man sat back in the booth. He put one hand flat on the table. Ethan watched the color go out of his face and then come back into it in a completely different way. "Who approved it? That's what we can't get to." "You can't get to it," the old man said, "because that authority sits with 3 people, and one of them was me, and I was in a bed in Denver with a tube in my arm." He picked up his cane. "Get the check." "No, don't get the check. I've got a tab. Get your coat." "Where are we going?" "To see a young man named Sanjay Rao," Richard Harrington said, "who I hired out of Berkeley in 2011 and put through night school and stood next to at his wedding." They found him in his office at 2 o'clock. Ethan stood by the door and did not say one word for 11 minutes, and afterward he could not have told anyone the details of what happened, only the shape of it, an old man sitting down slowly in a chair across from a man of 42 and saying without any anger at all, "Sanjay, tell me about Halbrook," and Sanjay Rao saying, "Mr. Harrington, don't do that, just tell me," and that being all it took. He'd been the one to sign it. He'd been told by Vale in that warm, reasonable voice that Halbrook was a diligence consult, that the rescope was protecting the firm from exposure, that Richard was dying, and Claire wasn't ready, and somebody in that building had to be the adult. He'd been given a consulting agreement of his own 8 months later, $90,000 a year. He'd taken it for 2 months and then stopped taking it and never said a word to anybody and had not slept properly since. "Does Claire know?" he asked at the end. He was crying, which Ethan had not expected and would rather not have seen. "Does she know it was me?" "She will in about 20 minutes, Richard Harrington said. "And then you're going to sit in a room on the 18th and say all of it out loud in front of the board with a lawyer of your own choosing sitting next to you. It'll end me." "Yes, Mr. Harrington." "Sanjay." The old man got up slowly on the cane. You were a good engineer and a coward, and I gave you a company to run, without ever once asking if you could carry it, and that part is mine. I'll say that part out loud, too. They had 11 days. Ethan later thought of those 11 days as the strangest of his life, because they were in every way that mattered the best ones he'd had since October 3 years ago, and he spent all of them terrified. Claire started coming to the house. It began as logistics documents, timelines, a whiteboard propped against the kitchen wall, and by the fourth night it wasn't logistics anymore. She'd show up at 6:40 with her heels already off in her hand, and Emma would meet her at the door with a report on the day's events, and somewhere in the middle of week 2, Ethan turned around at the stove and found the two of them at the table doing long division. Claire, with her sleeves pushed up, explaining remainders with a pen and a napkin. "You carry the leftover," Claire said. "That's all a remainder is. It's the part that doesn't fit anywhere yet." "That's dumb." "It's extremely dumb. I agree with you. Do it anyway." Emma did it, and got it right, and Claire held out her fist without looking up from the napkin, and Emma bumped it, and neither of them made anything of it at all, and Ethan stood at the stove with a spatula in his hand and had to turn back around. On the 9th night after Emma was down, they sat on the front steps because the house was too small for the conversation. "Can I tell you something stupid?" Claire said. "Booth rules." "We're not in a booth. Rules travel." She wrapped her arms around her knees. 34 years old in a $200 blouse sitting on a concrete step outside a rented ranch house with a broken gutter. "I keep catching myself planning things," she said. "Past the 18th, past 90 days. Her voice was very level. "She has a recital in May. I found myself checking whether I'd be in Tokyo." Ethan didn't say anything. "And then I remember what this is, and I want to put my head through a wall," Claire said. "Because I did this. I'm the one who put a 90 on it. I wrote it on a legal pad because I wanted you to have an exit, and now the exit's a countdown and I made it myself." "Claire, don't be kind." "I'm not being kind, I'm being accurate." He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "You want to know what I do? I set the coffee for 2 now, in the morning. I do it without thinking, and then I stand there looking at it like an idiot." Claire turned her head. "You do not. 9 days running." "Ethan." "I'm not saying it means anything," he said. "I'm saying Rule 2. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she put her head on his shoulder, and neither of them said one word for about 4 minutes, and that was all that happened, and Ethan Brooks would have traded a year of his life for another hour of it. The call came on the 16th at 1:40 in the afternoon. Ethan was in a meeting on 8. His phone lit up Lincoln Elementary. He was in the hallway before the second ring. "This is Ethan Brooks." "Mr. Brooks, this is Diane in the front office. Everything's fine. I want to say that first." A pause, and something wrong in her voice. "Emma's fine. She's sitting right here with me. But we had a man on campus about 10 minutes ago." Ethan's whole body went cold. "What man?" "He came to the fence at recess. He wasn't in the building. He asked Emma if her daddy had gotten married, and he had his phone out, and Mrs. Alvarez was on him in about 15 seconds, and he left before we got a name." Diane's voice cracked slightly. "She's not hurt. She's not even upset, honestly. She's more angry than anything. But we're required to—" "12 minutes, Ethan said. "I'm coming right now." "Mr. Brooks, we already called. She gave us the second contact." "Ruth." "No, sir. The one she added Thursday." Claire Harrington walked into the front office of Lincoln Elementary 11 minutes after that phone call, out of a meeting with 2 institutional lenders that she left without explanation, and Ethan got there 4 minutes behind her. And what he saw when he came through the door, he never forgot. His daughter was sitting on a bench with her arms folded, jaw set, absolutely furious. And Claire was crouched down in front of her in a suit on the linoleum, holding both of Emma's hands. "And I said I'm not supposed to talk to people I don't know," Emma was saying, "and he said he wasn't a stranger because he knows my dad, and I said that's what a stranger says, and then I walked away and got Mrs. Alvarez." "You did every single thing right," Claire said. "I know I did." "I know you know. I'm saying it anyway because I need to hear myself say it." Claire's voice was doing something Ethan had never heard it do. "Emma, listen to me. What did he look like? Tall, old, not old like a grandpa, old like a dad." Emma frowned. "He had a shirt with a zipper on the neck." Claire's head came up and met Ethan's eyes across the room. "A quarter zip." Dad, Emma saw him and went from furious to 7 years old in about a second and a half, and Ethan crossed the room and picked her up like she was 4, which she would normally have died before allowing in a school office. "You okay, baby?" "I'm fine, it wasn't scary, I just didn't like him." She had her chin on his shoulder. "Dad, why do people keep asking about you and Claire?" "Because grown-ups are nosy." "That's not a real answer." "No," Ethan said. "It's not." He set her down. He crouched. And he did the thing he'd sworn he'd never do again since the diner, which is to say, he told his 7-year-old the entire truth. "There's a man who wants Claire's company," he said, "and he thinks if he can make me and Claire look like liars, the people who run it will give it to him. And today, he sent somebody to ask you a question, because he thinks you're the softest part of this. That's what happened. That's all of it." Emma took that in. "Is he going to come back?" "No," Ethan said. "How do you know?" Ethan straightened up. "Because we're done waiting for the 18th, he said. He was wrong about the first part and right about the second, and the 18th came anyway. The boardroom on 11 held 14 people that morning, 11 directors. Priscilla, with a recorder, Sanjay Rao, with an attorney he'd hired with his own money, and at the back wall in a chair, he had not been offered Ethan Brooks. Marcus Vale did not wait for item 1. "Before we start," he said pleasantly, "I need to put something in front of this board, and I want to say at the top that I take no pleasure in it. None." "Marcus," Richard Harrington said. "Richard, I'd let you go first if this weren't a fiduciary matter." Vale nodded at the screen. "Priscilla, would you mind?" Priscilla did not move. "I'll do it myself then." Vale walked to the console and put his phone down, and the screen came up. "Brooks Ethan M., Harrington Claire, E. Clark County, Washington. Issued and recorded 9:52 a.m. The date sat there at the top of the screen 11 feet wide. Nobody said anything. "2 weeks ago," Marcus Vale said, "your CEO told this board she had been married for 2 years. 6 of you were in the room. I was in the room. There is a company-wide communication that says it. There are photographs from a foundation gala where 200 people in this industry congratulated her on an anniversary that does not exist." He turned around. "I'm not going to use the word fraud," he said. "I don't need to. I'm going to say something worse. I'm going to say that when this board applied ordinary pressure to its chief executive pressure, any CEO in America absorbs, she responded by inventing a husband." Gerald Pike said quietly, "Christ Almighty. And I want to be extremely clear that I don't blame her." Vale's voice softened. "She's 34. Her father was dying. Half this room has known her since she was in braces. Of course she reached for something. But this board cannot hand $200 million of client exposure to a judgment that does that under stress." He sat down. "I move that Claire Harrington be removed as chief executive effective at the close of this meeting." "Second," said a man at the far end of the table. Claire stood up. She was perfectly composed. Ethan at the back wall could see her left hand behind her chair, and it was shaking so hard she'd braced it flat against the leather to hold it still. "You're right," Claire said. The room went dead. "I told this board I'd been married 2 years. That wasn't true. I went to a courthouse on Saturday the 9th, and I made it true afterward, which is worse, not better." Her chin came up. "I'm not going to sit here and be defended. Ethan Brooks said one sentence in a diner because he was tired, and I stopped him from correcting it. Everything after that is mine. Every decision. Every day of it. He didn't build this. I did, and I did it because I was afraid, and I'd like the minutes to reflect that." Marcus Vale spread his hands sadly to the room. "There it is," he said. And Ethan Brooks stood up at the back wall. "Sit down, son," somebody said. "This is a closed—" "Let him talk," Richard Harrington said. Ethan walked to the end of the table. "Yes," he said. "It started as a mistake." Vale smiled. "It started at 9:02 on a Wednesday night at a diner on Poplar," Ethan said, "when a waitress named Doreen, who's worked there 38 years, looked at my daughter leaning on my arm and asked if we were newlyweds, and I said she's my wife, and I said it because I was tired, and because for 1 hour I'd forgotten that I'm a widower. That's the whole crime. That's the entire origin of this thing, and every one of you has now heard it from both of us, under no pressure at all." He put one hand on the back of a chair. "So let's talk about what happened after." "Mr. Brooks," Vale began, "you had your turn." Ethan didn't raise his voice. 2 days after that diner, my daughter's school needed a third emergency contact. And in a cafeteria full of parents, a teacher asked this woman if she was a relative, and she could have said anything. She could have said wife. That's the one place on earth where the lie would have cost her nothing and helped her a lot. He looked around the table. She said I'm not. In front of 40 people. She said I'm not related to this child, but I can be in that parking lot in 12 minutes any hour of any day, and I'll keep coming after any arrangement with her father ends. Put down whatever word fits. Gerald Pike had gone very still. On the 16th, a man came to the fence at Lincoln Elementary at recess and asked my 7-year-old if her daddy got married, Ethan said. The school called the second contact. She left a room with 2 lenders in it, and she was on the floor of that office in 11 minutes. That is a serious accusation, Vale said, and it has nothing to do with— I was wearing a Vale Capital quarter zip, Ethan said, same as he was wearing 4 booths away from us at Marino's on the 4th at 9 o'clock at night recording. His name's Dennis Boyle. He gave a statement to a lawyer yesterday afternoon, along with the text you sent him at 9:06 that night, which reads, and I'm quoting it exactly, stay on it. The room made a sound. Now here's the part that matters. Ethan set a folder on the table and slid it down. $11 million, Engineering Rescope Waterfront second quarter, invoiced by Halbrook Design Group, 2 men and a P.O. box in Bellevue. 31 hours of engineering behind $11 million. Approved at executive level in the 8 weeks Richard Harrington was in a hospital in Denver. Where did you get that? Vale said. That shortfall is the entire reason Vale Capital is in this building, Ethan said. You didn't rescue this firm from a hole. You dug it, and then you sold her the ladder. And for 2 years you've been telling this room she's too emotional to run a company that you broke. Sanjay Rao stood up. I signed it, he said. He told me to. I have the agreement. I have 8 months of it. Marcus Vale looked around a table of 11 people, and for the first time since Ethan had met him, said nothing at all. Richard Harrington put both hands on his cane. Marcus, he said, you're going to want your lawyer now. Ethan didn't watch him leave. He was looking at Claire, who was standing at the head of the table with her hands still braced flat on the leather, staring at him like she'd never seen him before in her life. Ethan, she said, I'm not done. You are extremely done, that was— Claire. His voice wasn't steady anymore, and he let it not be. I've got one more thing to say, and I'd rather do it wrong in front of these people than right in a parking lot in 90 days. 11 directors sat absolutely motionless. You put 90 days on a legal pad so I'd have a door, Ethan said. That was the kindest thing anybody's done for me since my wife died, and it's the only thing on that list I want to break. He swallowed. I set the coffee for 2, every morning. My daughter asks where you are at 6:15, and I've been standing at the back of this room for an hour, thinking about a countdown I agreed to, and I can't do it. I don't want the door. Ethan, I love you, Claire. And Claire Harrington, who had spent 34 years being valued at a number, who had run item 4 while a room decided what she was worth, who had walked 11 dark floors, looking for a light that was on, put her hand over her mouth in front of her father, her board, and every person who had ever thought of her as an asset. And she started to cry. Gerald Pike was the one who stopped it. He did it the way old men on boards do, without raising his voice, by putting one hand flat on the table and saying, all right, everybody, sit. Nobody sat. Sit, Pike said, and 11 people sat. Claire was still standing. Her hand was over her mouth, and she was not making any sound at all, which somehow made it worse to watch. And Ethan took one step toward her, and Pike said, Mr. Brooks, don't. Ethan stopped. I need you to understand something, son, and I'm going to say it kindly because what you just did in this room took more sand than anything I've seen in 20 years. Pike's voice was not unkind. It also did not have 1 inch of give in it. But this is a board of directors, not a wedding. And you have just told 11 fiduciaries that our largest outside investor manufactured an $11 million shortfall. And then you told our chief executive that you love her. And you did those 2 things 90 seconds apart. And now every single thing you said about the first one is going to get weighed against the second one by every lawyer who reads this transcript. Priscilla at the end of the table with the recorder in front of her did not look up. So, Pike turned. Priscilla, is that thing running? It's been running since 8:59, Mr. Pike. Good. Don't stop it. He looked back at Claire. Sit down, Claire. Claire sat down. Now. Pike laced his fingers. Sanjay. Yes, sir. You signed an $11 million invoice to a company with a post office box. I did. And you took $90,000 a year from the man who told you to. 2 payments, Sanjay said. His attorney put a hand on his forearm, and Sanjay moved it off. $15,000 total. I stopped in November. I never gave it back, and I never reported it, and I've had it in a savings account for 2 years because I didn't know what else to do with it. It's still there. I can wire it today. You'll wire it to counsel, not to us, Pike said. You're going to be indicted, you understand that? Yes, sir. You understand I'm going to vote to cooperate fully with the people who indict you. I'd vote the same way, Sanjay said. Pike nodded slowly. Richard, he said. Richard Harrington had not spoken in 11 minutes. He sat with both hands stacked on the head of his cane, and when he looked up, his face was gray. Say it, Gerald. You want me to say it, or you want to say it? I'll say it. The old man's voice was steady. This board should have never let a man who wanted my daughter's company sit in the room where we discussed her judgment. That's mine. I brought him in. I signed the paper in this room in 2019, and I told all of you he was the smartest capital partner in the state. He tapped the cane once. He was. That was the trouble. That's not what I need on the record, Richard. Then here's what you need on the record. Richard Harrington turned his head. My chief executive lied to this board on the 11th. She said she'd been married 2 years. She had not. She corrected it herself in this room before anybody had to make her, and she did it in a way that took every ounce of blame off a fourth-floor engineer who didn't deserve any of it. He looked at his daughter, and it was still a lie. And this board still has to do something about it, and if we don't, Marcus Vale's attorneys will spend a year telling a court we were sentimental about the founder's daughter, and they'll be right. Claire's chin came up. I know, she said. I'm not finished, and you're going to hate the next part. Dad. Gerald, I move that Claire Harrington be placed on paid administrative leave, effective immediately pending an independent review by outside counsel, with no prior relationship to this firm. 10 business days. Full access. And I move that this board waive privilege on everything they ask for. The room went very quiet. Second, Gerald Pike said. Ethan's hands closed on the back of the chair he was standing behind. You can't, Mr. Brooks. Pike didn't turn around. You want her cleared, or you want her defended, because those are 2 different things, and only one of them holds up in a deposition. Ethan made himself let go of the chair. Cleared, he said. Then be quiet. It passed 11-0. Claire voted for it herself. Afterward, in the hallway on 11, she stood with her badge in her hand and looked at it. I've never not had this, she said. Claire. I did homework in that conference room when I was 10. I have had a badge for this building since I was 15 years old. She turned it over. Priscilla has to walk me out. That's the policy. I wrote the policy. You wrote a good policy. Don't be reasonable at me right now. Okay. She looked up at him, and her eyes were still red, and there was something in her face he didn't like at all. Ethan, about what you said in there. You don't have to. I do have to, and I need to do it now, because if I wait a day, I'll do it badly. She squared up to him the way she must have squared up to 100 rooms. I'm not going to say it back. Ethan absorbed that. Okay, he said. No, don't do that. Don't take it like a man taking a hit. Her voice cracked, and she pushed straight through it. You stood up in front of 11 people, and you saved my company and my name and my father's 40 years, and then you said you loved me 90 seconds later in the same breath. And every day for the rest of my life, I would wonder which one I was answering. Claire, I have spent 34 years being wanted by people who wanted something, Claire said. Do you understand what that does to a person? I can't tell the difference anymore. I've lost the instrument. And you are the first man alive who never once asked me for a thing, and if I say it back to you today, an hour after you handed me my life back then, I'm just a woman signing a receipt. Ethan stood there in the hallway. So say it in 10 days, he said. What? 10 business days. That's the review. He shrugged, and his voice was rough. Say it after, or don't say it. But don't stand here and tell me you can't tell the difference, Claire, because you can. You've known the difference since you were 9 years old. That's the whole reason it hurts. Claire opened her mouth, and nothing came out. Priscilla came around the corner with a cardboard box and stopped about 10 feet away, mortified. Ms. Harrington, I'm so sorry. They said I have to. It's all right, Priscilla. Claire wiped under one eye with the side of her thumb, precisely the way a woman does when she's not going to let the day beat her. Give me the box. Emma took it worse than either of them expected. Ethan told her that night at the kitchen table, straight through, the way he'd promised the board the leave the 10 days, all of it, and Emma listened with her hands in her lap and her feet not touching the floor. So she's fired. She's not fired. She's on leave. There's a difference. What's the difference? The difference is at the end of 10 days, a bunch of lawyers say whether she did anything wrong. Did she? Ethan didn't answer fast enough. Dad. She told people we'd been married 2 years, he said. That was a lie, and she told it and I let her, and there's no way to make that not true. Emma's chin started to go. But you said it first. I did. You said it first and she's the one who gets in trouble. Emma, that's not fair. And she was crying now, hard, the ugly kind, and she shoved back from the table. You said it at the diner. You said it and she just held your arm. I saw it. Baby. She came to my school, Emma shouted. She came in 11 minutes. She left her big meeting and she sat on the floor. I know. So why isn't anybody saying that part? I did say that part, Ethan said. I said it out loud in front of 11 people this morning. Emma stopped. You did? Every word of it. The parking lot, the 12 minutes, all of it. He crouched down. I told them what she said to Mrs. Alvarez, that she wasn't going to put her name to a word that wasn't true, and that she'd come get you anyway forever no matter what happened between me and her. Emma's face was a mess. Did they believe you? I don't know. Some of them. Then say it again, Emma said. Say it louder. And that Ethan thought later was the single most useful piece of advice anybody gave him for the next 10 days. Marcus Vail did not go quietly, because men like Marcus Vail never do, and what he did was exactly what Claire had said he'd do. On the steps of the gala, he did not attack the marriage. He published it. On Thursday morning, a business outlet ran 900 words under the headline, Inside the Harrington Marriage That Wasn't, and the 9-second video was embedded at the top of it, and there was a photograph from the Fielding Gala of Claire, laughing with her hand on Ethan's arm, and a source described as familiar with the matter was quoted 11 separate times. By noon, it was everywhere. By 1 o'clock, there were 2 vans outside the Harrington building. By 3 o'clock, somebody had found Ethan's address. Ruth Whitfield called him at 3:20. Ethan, honey, there's a woman on your porch with a microphone. Is Emma? Emma is at my kitchen table eating a popsicle and doing a word search, and she has not looked out a window one time. Ruth's voice went flinty. I told that woman I'd call the police, and she said she's on a public sidewalk, and I said fine, then stay on it, and she has. Ruth. Don't you dare thank me. Sarah brought me a casserole every October for 6 years when my Harold was sick. You don't get to thank me for anything. A pause. The girl's fine. Go do what you have to do. What he had to do, it turned out, was sit across a table from 2 outside attorneys for 6 hours on Friday and answer the same 4 questions in 9 different ways. Mr. Brooks, when you said the words, she's my wife, had you and Ms. Harrington previously discussed any arrangement of any kind? No. Had you ever socialized outside of work? No. Had she ever contacted you personally? She texted me at 11:14 that night from a number she got from HR, and the first thing she wrote was that she recognized it was an abuse of her position. The 2 attorneys looked at each other. You still have that message? I have every message, Ethan said. I have all of them. I have the legal pad, too. What legal pad? Ethan reached into the folder and put it on the table. 4 rules in Claire Harrington's handwriting, dated with a 5th line at the bottom she'd added on the 4th day and never mentioned to anybody, which read, If E or the child is ever harmed by this, it ends that hour regardless of consequence to me. CH. The younger attorney read it twice. She wrote this the morning after. That's right. Before any of this went public. Before anything, Ethan said. That was 2 hours after she offered me 18 months of severance to walk out the door and forget her name. The older attorney put down his pen. Mr. Brooks, he said, why in God's name didn't you take it? Ethan thought about it. Because 106 people work in that building, he said, and because she walked 11 dark floors looking for a light that was on, and mine was the only one. On day 6, Richard Harrington asked his daughter to lunch, and she said no. On day 7, he asked again, and she said no. On day 8, he showed up at her apartment at 7 in the evening with a cane in one hand and a cardboard tube under his arm and stood in her doorway until she let him in. You look terrible, he said. Thank you. I've had 8 days to think of an opening line, and that's what came out. I want that noted. He lowered himself onto her sofa with a grunt. Sit down, Claire. I'd rather stand. Then stand. God knows you've earned it. She stood. I want to say a thing, Richard Harrington said, and I want to say it badly and all at once because if I try to say it well, I'll say it for another 10 years. Dad, I made you the succession plan when you were 11 years old. Claire stopped. Your mother left in April of '98, he said, and I sat in this apartment, the old house, the one on Cedar, and I did the only arithmetic I knew how to do. I thought I've got a building and a business and a girl, and the business is the only one of the three I understand. So I'll put the girl inside the business, and then I'll never have to learn the other thing. Claire's arms were folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. And it worked, her father said. That's the part I can't get around. It worked. You were extraordinary. You were 11, and you understood a P&L. You were 19, and you fixed a bid I'd fouled up, and every single time you did it, I got to feel like I'd done right by you instead of like I'd... He stopped. Say it, Claire said. Instead of like I'd hired my own daughter to be my company. The apartment was very quiet. You asked me a question when you were 9, Richard Harrington said. You asked if your mother was dead, or if she just hadn't wanted us. And I told you the truth because I thought the truth was a kindness, and then I watched you decide right in front of me at 9 years old that from then on you'd be so useful nobody could leave. Claire's face broke. Don't, she said. I watched you decide it, Claire. I watched it happen, and I didn't say one word, because a daughter who decides to be useful is very convenient for a man who doesn't know what else to do with her. His voice finally went. And then I had a heart attack in a hotel in Denver, and I lay in that bed for 6 weeks, and the thing I thought about was not the firm. Not one time. It was a 9-year-old in a conference room doing long division alone. Claire sat down on the arm of a chair because her legs stopped working. That's the second time this month somebody's mentioned long division to me, she said. What? Nothing. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. Nothing. Keep going. That's all of it. He was breathing hard. That's the whole confession, and I'm not going to ask you to say anything back because I've got no business collecting on it. You're 8 days late. I'm 25 years late. Let's be accurate. Claire laughed a wet, wrecked, terrible sound and put her hand over her eyes. Dad. Yeah. You voted to suspend me. I did. In front of 11 people. I did. He shifted the cane. And I'd do it again tomorrow, and I want you to understand exactly why, because it's the only thing I've got left to give you. He leaned forward. Marcus spent 2 years telling that room you were the founder's daughter and nothing else. If that board had gone soft on you last week, if Gerald had cleared his throat and moved on, that would have been true forever. You'd have kept the chair and lost the room, and you'd have known it, and it would have eaten you for 30 years. Claire didn't move. So I made them treat you like a chief executive, Richard Harrington said, which is the first time in my life I ever treated you like anything but my kid, and it happened to be the day it cost you your badge, and I'm aware of how that looks. It looks like you finally did it, Claire said. It looks like I finally did it. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then he pushed the cardboard tube across the coffee table. What's that? Open it. She opened it. She unrolled what was inside on the coffee table and put 2 fingers on the corner to hold it flat and went completely still. Where did you get this? Attic, Cedar Street. I've had the house rented out for 11 years, and there's a box up there I've never once opened because I knew what was in it. It was a set of drawings on heavy paper done in pencil and colored pencil of a 4-story building with a courtyard and a stepped roofline and a small figure standing at the entrance for scale. In the corner, in careful block letters, C. Harrington, age 16. You had a portfolio, her father said. Rhode Island School of Design accepted you in April of your senior year. You got the letter on a Tuesday, and I sat you down that Friday, and I explained to you very reasonably. I was extremely reasonable. That was my whole thing, that the firm needed somebody who could run it, not somebody who could draw it, because we could always hire somebody who could draw it. Dad. You said okay. His voice was flat. You didn't argue. 17 years old, and you looked at me and said, okay, and you went to business school, and you have never mentioned it again to me one single time in 17 years. Claire's hand was flat on the drawing. I mentioned it once, she said. When? To Mom, on the phone, in 2009. She didn't look up. She said, well, sweetheart, your father's usually right about money. Richard Harrington closed his eyes. I'm going to tell you what I think, he said, and then I'll get out of your apartment. That review is going to clear you on everything that matters, and it's going to hang you on the 11th because you did lie to a board, and there's no getting around it. Gerald will offer you a censure and a reduction in authority and a public statement, and you'll keep the chair, and everybody will be very relieved. That's the outcome, yes. Don't take it. Claire looked up. Don't take the deal, Claire. Take the chair and you'll spend the next 20 years being the woman who lied and got to stay, and every argument you ever lose, somebody will be thinking about a diner. He stood slowly using the cane and the arm of the sofa. You want to know what I'd do? I'd resign the chief executive's job on my own 2 feet before they can offer me a discount on it, and I'd take the drawing job. The one you were accepted for at 17. We call it a design studio now, and it's got 40 people in it, and it hasn't had a real head since Bernard died in 2016. That's a demotion. It is an enormous demotion, her father said. It's also the only thing I've ever heard you talk about in this room without your shoulders up around your ears. He got to the door and stopped. Also, it's not in the reporting line for structural, he said, which I'm told matters, though nobody in this family has ever had the decency to tell me about it directly. Dad, Claire, thank you for the drawings. Yeah, he said, and let himself out. The review came back on a Wednesday at 4:40 in the afternoon, and it was 41 pages long, and Gerald Pike read 3 sentences of it aloud in a boardroom with 14 people in it. Claire Harrington did not use company resources for personal benefit. Claire Harrington did not receive any financial gain from the represented relationship. Claire Harrington made a material misstatement to this board on the 11th and disclosed it herself unprompted within 7 days. That's it, Pike said. That's the whole finding. Everything else in here is about Vail, and that part goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office on Friday, whether we like it or not. He put the folder down. Claire, the Governance Committee has a motion. Formal censure, a reduction of your unilateral authority to the 2 million threshold, a public statement, and you keep the chair. It's got 7 votes, and I'll be the 8th. Claire stood up. I decline it, she said. Pike blinked. You decline the censure. I decline the seat. She put 1 page down on the table. That's my resignation as chief executive effective at the close of this meeting. It's not conditional and I'm not negotiating it. The room erupted. Pike had to knock on the table twice. Claire, sit down and think about... I've thought about it for 8 days on my sofa, Gerald, which is more consecutive thinking than I've done since 2018. Her voice was completely steady now. Here's my reasoning, and then you can vote on whatever you want. If I keep this chair, every good decision I make for the next 20 years gets an asterisk. Somebody in a room I'm not in will always say, well, that's the one who lied about the marriage. And they'll be right. And I'll spend 2 decades being careful instead of being good. That's pride talking. It's arithmetic. It's the same arithmetic Marcus ran on me for 2 years, and it worked because it was correct. She looked around the table. He was never wrong that a story beats an argument. He was only wrong about which story. Pike sat back. And what exactly do you propose to do instead? Because I'll tell you right now, this board is not accepting a resignation from the firm. Not after that document. The clients will read it as an admission. I'm not leaving the firm. Then what? I want the design studio, Claire said. Nobody spoke. 40 people. No P&L authority. No hiring authority outside the studio. No line into structural procurement or finance. She set down a 2nd page. Full org charts attached. I'd report to whoever you put in this chair, and I'd like it on the record that I'll be reporting to them for real, and if they tell me no on a project, I'll say yes, sir, and go do the work. Gerald Pike stared at her for a long moment. Your father put you up to this. My father gave me a cardboard tube, Claire said. I did the rest myself. Claire. Gerald, I was accepted to architecture school when I was 17. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands flat on the table were pressed down hard. I have spent every day since then being extremely good at a job I never once asked for. And 2 weeks ago, a waitress at a diner asked me a question about my life, and I discovered I did not have one. So I'm taking the $8,000 a year in pay cut, and I am going to go draw buildings. And if that's a scandal, then it's the cheapest scandal this firm's had all month. Somebody down the table laughed. Then Pike laughed once and rubbed his forehead. Motion to accept the resignation of the chief executive, he said, and to appoint her director of the design studio effective the same day with the reporting structure as attached. Second, said Richard Harrington. It carried 10 to 1. Claire abstained and then asked who the one was, and Pike said, "Me. Somebody in this room ought to be on the record saying it was a waste of a hell of a CEO." And Claire had to leave the room for a minute. Ethan was waiting in the lobby when she came down because Priscilla had texted him one word now, and he'd taken the stairs. She came out of the elevator with a box in her arms for the second time in 11 days. "Claire, don't be nice to me. I've got about 4 minutes of composure left and I'm rationing it." "I'm not being nice, I'm being nosy. What happened?" "I resigned." Ethan stopped walking. I resigned as chief executive, and I took the design studio, and I'm going to be drawing buildings for a living starting Monday, and I make $8,000 a year less than I did on Tuesday." She said it all in one breath. "And before you say anything, I need you to know it was not for you. I want that extremely clear. I did not do it so we could. I did it because a man came into my apartment with a cardboard tube and made me look at something I drew when I was 16. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay. Yeah, okay." He took the box out of her arms. "Then I'm resigning too." Claire's head came up. "What?" "I typed it this morning. It's in my drawer. 2 weeks' notice." He was already walking toward the door. "There's a firm in Tacoma that's been calling me twice a year since 2021. It's 40 minutes each way, which is bad, and it's 11,000 more, which is good. And it means nobody in that building or any building ever gets to say one word about..." "Shh. Put the box down." "Claire." "Put the box down, Ethan." He put the box down on a lobby bench. Claire Harrington stood in the middle of her father's lobby with her jaw set and her eyes bright and about 100 people's worth of foot traffic going past on both sides. "No," she said, "you don't get a vote on my..." "I get exactly 1 vote on it and I'm using it." She stepped in close enough that nobody could hear her. "You have spent 3 years sacrificing every single thing you have for other people. You gave up a promotion track to do school pickup. You ate gas station sandwiches so a 7-year-old could go to the dentist. You turned down 18 months of severance for 106 strangers." Her voice shook, and she kept going. "And I have watched you for 6 weeks look for the next thing to give up. It's the only reflex you've got left. That's not... You'd drive 40 minutes each way twice a day for $11,000 so that a room of people you don't like can't say a sentence about me." Claire's hand closed on his wrist hard, exactly the way it had in the booth. "I will not become another thing you sacrifice, Ethan Brooks. I've had a father who priced me and a man who bid on me, and I am not going to be the reason the only person who never wanted anything from me finally gives something up." Ethan stood there. "Then what do we do?" he said. "You stay on the 4th floor and you keep doing the best structural work in this state. And I go draw buildings in a studio that has no authority over you whatsoever, which I checked with 2 attorneys before I proposed it." She let go of his wrist. "And in about 4 years, when they try to make you head of structural, you'll take it, and the paper trail will be 3 inches thick, and I'll be in a room somewhere pretending I had nothing to do with it. That's the solution. That's the solution. You worked that out on your sofa." "I worked that out on my sofa," Claire said, at approximately 4 in the morning several times. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "It's been 11 days, he said. Claire went very still. 10 business, she said. 10 business. "That's the review came back 40 minutes ago. That's not exactly a fair..." "I'm not asking," Ethan said. "I want to be clear about that. I said what I said in that boardroom, and I meant every word, and I'm not taking 1 syllable of it back. And if you never say anything back to me for the rest of my life, I'm still going to set the coffee for 2, because I'd rather stand there like an idiot every morning than go back to how it was." People kept walking past on both sides. "That's not fair," Claire said. "Probably not. You can't say a thing like that to me in a lobby." "Where would you like me to say it?" And Claire Harrington laughed and put both hands over her face and then took them down. "I love you," she said. Ethan didn't move. "I love you, and I've known it since a cafeteria bench at Lincoln Elementary, and I've been holding it in a drawer like a resignation letter for 3 weeks because I was afraid it was gratitude." Her chin came up. "It's not gratitude. I checked. I checked in every way I know how to check. I ran it like a diligence file, Ethan. I am not exaggerating. I made a list." "You made a list." "I made a list." "Of course you did." "There were 11 items." 11. "The 11th one," Claire said, "was that I don't want the coffee. I don't even like your coffee. It's terrible. It's the same coffee Sarah made, isn't it? That's a pot. Nobody's used a pot since... and Ethan Brooks put his hand on the side of her face in the lobby in front of everybody and kissed her. It lasted considerably longer than a second and a half. When they came apart, Claire had both hands on the front of his shirt and her forehead against his collarbone, and she said into his shirt, "Priscilla is watching. I know. 2 vans outside. I know." "I don't care," Claire said. "I want it on the record that I don't care. Someone write that down." Emma Brooks was at the kitchen table with a math worksheet when they came through the door together at 6:15, and she looked up and looked at the two of them and then very carefully put down her pencil. "Well," she said. "Well, what?" Ethan said. "Dad." Claire pulled out the chair across from her and sat down and folded her hands businesslike. "Emma," she said, "I quit my job today." Emma's eyes went enormous. "You got fired." "I quit. There's a difference, and I will explain the difference to you at great length, because it is the difference between a person deciding and a person being decided about, and it's the most important thing I've learned in a year." Claire took a breath. "But that's not the headline. Do you remember the 90 days? Emma's whole body went rigid. "Yeah," she said very small. "It's off." Claire put her hand flat on the table. "There's no countdown. There isn't a date. I'm not going anywhere at the end of anything, and I'd like to say the rest of this to you before I say it to anyone else, because you're the one who's been keeping score." Emma looked at her father. Ethan nodded. And Emma Brooks, 7 years old, who had learned to say, "It's really okay, Dad," in a voice that meant she'd already lowered her expectations, put her face down in her arms on top of her math worksheet, and cried like a much younger child. Claire came around the table so fast she knocked the chair over. She got there before he did, which Ethan noticed, and never forgot that Claire Harrington, who had spent 34 years learning to stay on the far side of a table, went around it without thinking. Emma, honey, look at me. I'm okay." "You are absolutely not okay, and you don't have to be." Claire got down on the floor beside the chair. "Come here." And Emma turned and put both arms around her neck and held on the way. A person holds on to something they've been told every single day for 6 weeks is temporary. "You said 90 days, Emma said into her shoulder. "I did." "You said it out loud. Dad wrote it on the yellow paper." "He did." "I counted them," Emma said, and Ethan had to grab the counter. "I made a chart. It's under my bed. I crossed off every one." Claire closed her eyes. "How many were left?" 51. 51! Claire's voice came apart on the number. "Emma Brooks, you go get that chart." Emma pulled back blotchy and confused. "Why?" "Because we're going to burn it. We can't burn things that's illegal. Then we'll cut it up with the good scissors." "Dad doesn't let me use the good scissors." Claire looked over her shoulder at Ethan, and her face was wrecked and absolutely fierce at the same time. "Tonight she uses the good scissors," she said. So that was how it went at 6:40 on a Wednesday evening in a rented ranch house with a broken gutter, a 7-year-old and a woman who had resigned from a $200 million company 4 hours earlier, sitting on a kitchen floor cutting a hand-drawn calendar into confetti, while a structural engineer stood at the stove and pretended very hard to be watching the pasta. Emma held up the last piece, a square with a crooked 51 on it. "Can I keep this one?" "Why that one?" Claire said. "Because it's the one that didn't happen." Claire took it out of her hand and looked at it for a second and put it in her jacket pocket instead. "I'm keeping it," she said. "You get the other 90. The U.S. Attorney's Office made its filing on a Friday in November, and the word in the headline was the one Marcus Vail had promised he'd never have to say. Ethan didn't read this coverage. Priya read it to him at the printer out loud with tremendous enjoyment for 11 consecutive workdays. "Wire fraud, Ethan." "Priya, wire fraud. I heard you the first 9 times. You know what the best part is?" She waved the page at him. Paragraph 4. The scheme was identified in the course of an internal review initiated by the company's board. That's it. That's the whole credit. 22 words for 2 years of me screaming about a P.O. box in Bellevue. "You want your name in a federal indictment?" Priya thought about it. "I want a raise," she said. She got one in January, signed by a chief executive named Gerald Pike, who had taken the chair on an interim basis, and then at 71 discovered he liked it and kept it for 4 more years. He gave her the money and a title and a line into cost review with authority to flag anything at any threshold without approval from anybody. He also, on his first day, walked down to the 4th floor and stood at Ethan's desk with his hands in his pockets. "Mr. Brooks, Mr. Pike, I'm going to say a thing once and then never again." Pike looked at the wall Ethan's desk faced. "That was a hell of an hour you had in my boardroom." "Yes, sir. I voted against her resignation." "I heard. I want you to know why, because I suspect she hasn't told you, and I suspect she won't." Pike's jaw worked. "It wasn't sentiment. That woman is the best operator this firm has had in 40 years, including her father, and I told her so, and she looked me in the eye and gave up the chair anyway to go draw." He shook his head slowly. "In 50 years of business, I have watched maybe 4 people voluntarily hand back power. Every one of them was the person I'd have most trusted to hold it. That's the joke, son. That's the whole joke." "I'll tell her you said it." "You will not," Pike said. "That's an order from the chief executive," Ethan told her that night. "Sanjay Rao pled in the spring. He went in with his own attorney and his own money and no deal from the firm, and he stood up in a federal courtroom and said the words out loud, and he got 14 months. Claire went. Ethan drove her and waited in the hall because she asked him to. She came out after and stood in the corridor with her arms crossed. He asked me to forgive him. "What did you say?" "I said no." She said it flatly. "And then I said I'd write to the judge about the $15,000 sitting untouched in a savings account for 2 years, and about a man who could have taken a settlement and destroyed my father's company on the way out, and instead sat down in a room and said I signed it." She let out a breath. "And he said thank you, and I said I hadn't forgiven him, and he said he knew." "That's not nothing. It's not forgiveness." "No," Ethan said. "It's the thing you do while you're waiting to see if forgiveness shows up." Claire looked at him. "Where do you get these?" she said. "Booth rules." The design studio was on the 9th floor, and it had 40 people in it, and for the first 6 weeks, Claire Harrington was by her own furious admission terrible at her job. "I can't draw." "You can draw." "I could draw 17 years ago." She had her forehead on the kitchen table. "Do you know what the software is now? Everybody in that studio is 29, and they do in an afternoon what I do in a month with a pencil. And today, a young man named Owen very kindly offered to walk me through the interface." "What did you say?" "I said, yes, please." Ethan set a plate down in front of her. "Then you're already better at it than most of the executives in that building." "Don't be encouraging. I'm having a crisis. Eat your dinner." "Claire," Emma said without looking up from her homework, "you can use my tablet. It has a drawing thing." "Thank you, Emma. It's mostly for horses." "I'll adapt." By March, she wasn't terrible. By the following winter, the studio's proposal for the East Waterfront Pavilion, the one project Marcus Vale's shell company had never touched, went out with her name in the corner of the drawings, and it was everyone agreed the best thing the firm had put in front of a client in a decade. Ethan drove past the site 4 times before it opened. He never said so. Richard Harrington moved back to Cedar Street in October. He gave the tenants 9 months and a moving allowance, and he took the house back, and he was not a well man, and everybody knew it, and nobody said it. He came to dinner on Sundays. He had opinions about Ethan's cooking that he expressed as questions. He taught Emma to play cribbage and then lost to her 11 times in a row and accused her of counting cards, which she was because he had taught her that too. And on a Sunday in February, out on the front steps with a cane across his knees, he said, "Ethan." "Sir?" "Richard. I'm working on it. Work faster, I'm 77. He tapped the cane. "That girl in there calls me Mr. Harrington." "You want her to call you something else?" "I want her to call me whatever she wants," the old man said. "That's the point. That's the whole point. I spent 40 years assigning people their roles, and I'm done with it." Ethan looked at him. "She's been calling you Grandpa Rich behind your back since November," he said. Richard Harrington sat very still on his daughter's boyfriend's front steps. "Has she?" he said. "To her friends. At school." Ethan looked out at the street. "She told Marcy's mom you invented a whole building. She was very specific about it. She said you invented it out of nothing with a table and a bank loan, and that you're kind of mean, but on purpose." The old man made a sound. "Kind of mean, but on purpose," he repeated. "That's a quote." "That is the finest thing anybody has said about me in 50 years, Richard Harrington said, and he had to look at the street for a while, too. He lived another 2 years and 8 months. He was at the wedding. It was a small one, 31 people in a rented hall with folding chairs in June because Claire said she had already had the 4-minute version at a courthouse counter, and this time she wanted the whole ridiculous thing. Priya organized it and ran it like a project and made a spreadsheet. Ruth Whitfield made the cake and refused payment and threatened anyone who mentioned it. Gerald Pike gave a toast that started as a joke about load paths and ended with him sitting down abruptly and clearing his throat for a long time. Doreen came in her good coat and cried harder than anybody, and Emma Brooks, 9 years old, walked down the aisle first because she'd negotiated for it, and because when Claire had knelt down 4 months earlier in the kitchen and asked her a very careful question about whether she'd like to be adopted, Emma had listened to the entire careful speech and then said, "Do I get to keep Mom's name?" "You keep everything," Claire said. "Every single thing. Nothing gets taken out to make room." "Then okay. Emma, you can take a week to—" "I don't need a week," she'd shrugged. "You came in 11 minutes. Her name is Emma Sarah Brooks. That was Claire's condition, not Ethan's. She raised it with the attorney before anything else and would not be moved on it. And when the paperwork came through, she framed the page with the middle name on it and hung it in the hallway where the school photos were. Sarah's picture stayed on the shelf in the living room. It never moved. Claire dusted it herself on Saturdays, and once when Emma was 11 and going through the phase where everything her stepmother did was wrong, Emma said something cruel about it, and Claire didn't flinch. "She's your mother," Claire said. "I'm not in a competition with a woman who isn't here to defend herself, and if you ever hear me act like I am, I want you to say exactly what you just said to me in exactly that tone." Emma apologized 11 minutes later. She got that from somewhere. They went back to Marino's on Poplar on a Wednesday in October 3 years after, because Ethan had a thing about October, and Claire had learned not to ask him about it in advance, only to clear the evening. Doreen was working the floor. She was slower. She still didn't hurry. She saw them come in, a man, a woman, a girl, who was tall enough now that the bike helmet was 3 years in a closet, and she stopped in the middle of the aisle with the coffee pot in her hand. "Well, look at this." "Hey, Doreen. Corner booth's open." She pointed with the pot. "Don't argue with me. I saved it. I've been saving it on Wednesdays for a year and a half like a fool." They sat down, Emma on the inside, Claire across. "Now." Doreen put her free hand on her hip and looked the three of them over, the way she'd looked them over the first time. "I want you to know something. I have told that story to every single person who has sat in that booth for 3 years." "Oh no," Ethan said. "Oh yes, the whole thing." Doreen aimed the pot at him. "I tell him I said, 'Are you newlyweds?' and this man looked at me and said, 'She's my wife,' like he'd been saying it his whole life, and this woman grabbed his arm under the table like the boat was going down." She shook her head. "And every time I tell it, somebody says, 'Oh, Doreen, that's a nice story, you made that up.'" "You didn't make it up," Emma said. "No, baby, I did not." "He was lying, though," Emma said. "Emma, what he was." Doreen looked at Emma for a second. Then she started to laugh, and she had to put the pot down on the table. "Honey," she said, "I've been waitressing 38 years. I know what a lie sounds like." She wiped her eye with her wrist. "That man wasn't lying. He was just early." Nobody said anything for a moment. "I knew it," Doreen said, straightening up. "That's what I always say at the end. I say I knew there was something real about those two. I knew it the second I walked up to that table. Pie's coming. Don't fight me on the pie." She went off toward the kitchen. Claire put her hand out on the table, palm up, and Ethan took it, and Emma, who was 11 now and had opinions about public displays of affection, made a noise of tremendous suffering and did not move an inch away from her father's arm. "You know what I think about?" Claire said. "What?" 11 floors. She turned his hand over and looked at it. "I think about the fact that I walked 11 floors that night, and there was exactly one light on. And if you'd gone home at 5 like a sane person, I'd have gotten in my car and driven to an empty apartment, and on Saturday I'd have said yes to Marcus because I was going to. I want you to know that. I'd already decided. I was going to call him Saturday morning." "You wouldn't have." "I would have." She said it evenly. "I'd have married a man who thought of me as a structure, and I'd have been very good at it, and I'd have been dead by 50 in every way that isn't medical." She looked up. "You were working late for $40. Field trip in March. $40. "It was a good field trip," Ethan said. "She saw a submarine." And Claire Harrington laughed, the real one, the one that came from somewhere under the armor, the one that had taken 34 years and a laminated menu to get out of her. Ethan Brooks sat in the corner booth at Marino's with his daughter's shoulder against his arm and his wife's hand in his, and he thought about a Tuesday in October and a grocery store and a phone call that had ended one life and about a Wednesday in a diner and 4 words that had started another. He'd spent 3 years believing those two things couldn't live in the same man. That loving somebody now meant putting Sarah down. They could. They did. He carried both, and neither one weighed less for the other. Their whole life together started with a mistake one sentence said out loud by a tired man who forgot to be careful. He never took it back.